Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home
upward extensions in London. Before we get started, please may I remind everyone to switch their devices to silent mode and ask that members and guests ensure that electronic devices are not placed in front of their microphones. Please adjust your microphones so you can be heard clearly and remember to lift them from the base if needed. Members of the public are encouraged to follow at London Assembly on various social media platforms. When using X, please include the hashtag Assembly Planning for this meeting. Can I now ask our committee clerk, Lauren Harvey, to confirm any apologies for today's meeting?
Thank you, Chair. We've received apologies from Assembly Member Moema.
Thank you. Can I ask the committee to note the recommendations set out at item 2 and ask if members have any other interest to declare? Can I ask the committee to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 10th of June 2026 to be signed by me as a correct record? Can I ask the committee to note the ongoing actions arising from its previous meetings and the additional correspondence received? We now move on to our main item of business, a discussion on upward extensions in London. We've structured our meeting into 2 panels, and I would like to welcome our first panel of guests. We have Dr. Rietta Oosthuizen, Partner Planning HTA Design, Dr. Charles Gillott, Senior Sustainability Engineer, WSP UK and Ireland. Claire Brady, Team Leader, London Development Advice Team and South East Office, Historic England. And Nicholas Boy-Smith, MBE, Founder and Chairman, Create Streets. We'll now move on to our questions. The first question is from myself, and it is, what is the potential for expanding housing capacity in London through upward extensions to existing homes and buildings? We'll start with Retta and then go along the panel.
I think the answer to the complete potential needs to be tested, because there has been a number of different studies to show the potential, but not actually the full range of different sources for housing delivery. So HTA did a piece of work in 2016 for Apex Airspace, and at that time they were very interested in helping local authorities to develop their airspace. So we did an estimation starting with Camden as a detailed borough to investigate, and we excluded conservation areas from that study, found that in Camden alone there's potential for 2,800 homes across the entirety of London. If you take an average of 60 square metres, which is sort of between a 1 and 2 bed, using modular construction and 75% of roof space, there is potential for around 180,000 homes across London. So I think the picture is slightly more complex now. It's 10 years later. We've had Grenfell, and actually building over 18 metres is quite complex, because projects like that would mean that you need second staircase, you need to retrofit sprinklers in existing units, and depending on the floor-to-ceiling height, that could result in really suboptimal homes for people. And also the business model of some of the original developers were based on just developing the airspace. And of course, you can't do that. If you develop with residents in situ, you have to think of making wider improvements. So I think something that we as a practice are also very much for is the enlargement of current properties. I mean, I think Nicholas here have done a lot of work supporting mansard roofs. We did a project in Primrose Hill for 12 residents in 2012. At the time, it wasn't a conservation area. Camden Council said no roof extensions. They were worried at the butterfly profile of some of these homes. But through demonstrating that you can do a singular design for a group of properties, making a contribution to the conservation area, built as a singular contract, we were able to convince the council that you can deliver it, a project like this, which makes a positive benefit to character, rather than singular extensions, which does not make a positive contribution to character of that conservation area. A lot of people were very much against that, because they said it's just a way of people to make their homes larger. But actually, since then, we've done projects for Populo, their Green Loft project, and I think they're going to be here this afternoon in the second session. It is a very legitimate way of looking at existing smaller scale housing stock across London to enlarge it beyond what permitted development rights would allow, and therefore actually having very positive energy efficiency benefits. Now, I think putting that type of potential together with rooftops and maybe thinking not about expanding beyond 18 metres has not been, as far as I know, tested as a whole. I spoke to a student from UCL that did a PhD last year, and I think over 50% of extensions in the 10 years running up to 2018-19, well, and he's the expert here as well, it can tell us a bit more about it, were only one story. And I think, I think there's definitely more work that needs to be done around testing the full capacity.
Thank you, Charles.
Yeah, taking the word of potential from the question, I think it's important to recognise that the word potential can mean many different things. There's obviously the technical side of this, whether that means whether we have a building stock that can physically take the additional load structurally associated with that, whether the grid supporting the power network grid supporting that can take the additional load, and then you've obviously got the non-technical constraints surrounding that, whether that be legislation or other policy instruments. A study out of the University of Sheffield, I think it's 2022 or 2021, looking at the permitted development rights in relation to vertical extension, put the number of eligible properties for Greater London at around 500,000. So potential, yes, there is significant potential. Obviously, taking into account that extensions can be 1-storey, 2-storey, can generate new space within an existing dwelling or result in subdivision and generation of new dwellings. The estimation was about 1.2 million people could be homed within that space. So not 1.2 million new units, but 1.2 additional people could be homed through that permitted development vertical extension. Now, that is potential of that particular instrument. There is obviously significant potential beyond that. That would limit extensions to only 1 or 2 storeys, to situations where planning permission was not required, and we know that that is quite an unfavourable approach when it comes to vertical extensions, and potential may be well beyond that if we went through a more traditional planning approval route.
Thank you. Claire.
Hello, I'm representing Historic England here. Our focus is principally casework on historic buildings and areas, so listed buildings, conservation areas, which are designated. Some boroughs in London have more potential more heritage potential. For example, we have Westminster, where 3/4 of the borough is actually designated conservation areas, and you've got thousands of listed buildings. Other areas, there's less designated heritage assets, particularly in suburbs. And so the potential will change depending on whether or not it affects a heritage property. However, we are also very aware that heritage properties have traditionally been extended, and many are built out of masonry, particularly those sort of pre-20th century, and can take an additional story. For example, mansards in Kensington, Tower Hamlets, Camden, Westminster. And we also have many buildings that are quite easy to upwardly extend in terms of their significance and character being led by that. So, for example, we've recently dealt with a roof extension at St Martin's Le Grand, the former post office in the City of London, where an architect has designed a fantastic 2-3 stories over an existing building. So heritage shouldn't stand in the way, potentially, of upward development. These aren't necessarily always examples of housing uplift, but it is entirely possible to, you know, in many cases, to actually bring forward additional space on top of on top of heritage assets. Beyond heritage areas, we think there's a lot of potential, and we've actually produced also a new publication called Good Growth Housing, Heritage and Housing, which actually goes into many forms of intensification growth, particularly for housing in London, and looks at various typologies. And we do think that upwards extension is part of the solution, alongside other forms of growth, such as infill extensions, rear extensions, small sites, and larger redevelopments. So this is very good. It sets our position very well. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nicholas.
Thank you. You started with the doctors, and you end up with just a mere chairman. I feel very put in my place. Listen, thank you. I'm very grateful that you, as a committee, are looking at this. I think this is an incredibly important subject. I know you looked at it before, so just to sort of flag up my genuine admiration for your sort of, your focus on this, which I think is right and well judged. I'll start with some bad news, and then I'll hopefully give you some good news, and I will also give you some data that we haven't yet published. The timing of this is just perfect, because we literally have something nearly ready to publish. We're literally proofing it this morning, so I will send it to the committee afterwards. So under the current planning and regulatory regime, I think the potential practically, not spatially, not physically, of upward extension remains uncomfortably modest, despite, and you're all aware of the change in MPPF a few years ago. I haven't got the latest numbers, but we were still getting 600, 500 applications per year in London recently. That's not the very latest numbers, which is just, it's far too low. The amount being overturned and supported on appeal, thanks to the change in the NPPF, has gone up a lot, particularly in the Planning Inspectorate. But the amount of work involved, the risk of not getting planning permission, the fact you need to pay, planning consultants, architects, you need to spend probably tens of thousands of pounds before you know you've got those extra bedrooms or that extra flat on the top of a bigger building. That is what economists call, obviously, a barrier to entry, and it is working very well. So under the current situation, unless there's some combination of national, GLA and local borough change, which is doable, the potential is low. That's the bad news. The good news is that if you make use of some quite simple fixes in the planning system, which I think we'll come back to in more detail, I'll elaborate them very briefly, the spatial opportunity is immense. So we've literally just done, working with one of my analysts, we've just done some research looking at energy performance certificates, Delling stock data, typology-specific updates. We literally looked at all of London. We've actually looked at all of the country. We've made some assumptions about uptick if you change some policy, and come back to what that means, and making quite modest assumptions, low end 2.5, 5% uptick, upper end 5, 10% response rate. I'm not assuming the vast majority of people don't actually respond to a policy lever. And we've made very specific assumptions by age of building and by typology, whether it's terrace, semi-detached, terrace, etc. And I can send that all to you. Our low-end estimates for the number of homes that would create in London, or could create, was about 140,000. I mean, I could do that all the way to 141,942, but I think that might be false specificity. And the upper end was 320,000, or just a bit over. And critically, and I really want to stress this point, the number of bedrooms is from 300,000 to 680,000. And the bedrooms really matters, even though I know it's not in national housing targets, because bedrooms reduce homelessness. And it really, that point just needs making time after time after time, because I don't think the national debate picks up on it enough. So spatially, the opportunity is there, but it does require planning and policy change, which doesn't require statute, which you and local boroughs can do now to unlock that. I'm sure you'll come back to that point, but so change is needed to get to reach that opportunity.
And just, Nicholas, coming back to that, there is an argument that some people put forward that this would just benefit, changes to make it easier to do upward extensions, mansards, etc., would just benefit existing homeowners and wouldn't benefit, say, first-time buyers. What kind of pushback would you have for that?
So it would benefit people who already own homes. It would benefit people who already own bigger buildings which can add a home on top. That's absolutely true. It would also benefit anyone who is in the HMO market looking for a bedroom to rent formally, because it would increase the supply of single bedrooms either directly rented out or as additional bedrooms within an existing home. And it would improve the chances for people to respond to changes in the labour market and to job opportunities. So people coming to London, people leaving London, people on the path to homelessness, all the people who need a bedroom, all the people who are out there looking for rental properties, by putting, ultimately, very systemic downward pressure on price increases, it would increase them as well. But yes, would it help private homeowners en route to do that? Yes, it would.
Thank you. And Claire, you mentioned Westminster in your response. I represent Westminster on the Assembly. I was a former Westminster councillor and sat on planning committee in Westminster. And one of the motivations actually for this investigation was that when I was a councillor in Westminster, often we'd get recommendation to approve iceberg basements, or basements more broadly, under mews houses, for instance, in conservation areas, but then an application for a mansard on a street where half the properties actually already had a mansard would come through with a recommendation to eject. So what's your kind of view, and Historic England's view, on the benefits of, say, mansard development or upward development versus basements?
Basements are quite complicated. I know a lot of boroughs will have very specialist policies for them because they create a large void underneath the property, so often require foundations to be beefed up, a lot of construction, a lot of movement, etc., of spoil and spill. And, you know, the neighbours often find it disruptive. We also potentially have issues with archaeology, and there can be water movements locally that can be affected. So basements are a massive undertaking and are very costly. and cause a lot of disturbance. A loft extension will cause a lot of disturbance. I've just had one a couple of years ago, and living in that property was not much fun. However, you don't have to potentially beef up your property too much in terms of the foundations. A lot of buildings can take an additional lightweight story, and often you don't even have to impact on the front elevation of your building, such as my Edwardian terrace. It's generally a box extension on the back. So it's a relatively cheap and easy way of actually extending your house. In terms of a listed building or conservation area, there are many ways of doing it, and often, as we've seen in some of the Kensington, Tower Hamlets, sort of guidance documents, probably Westminster has some as well, it can be quite formulaic, and you can look at the neighbours for inspiration on how to detail it, etc. And it is, if it's in a terrace, it can sometimes be a little bit tricky. If you are removing, say, a very early roof, that might be a problem which we occasionally come across, and it may preclude, in listed building terms, taking that one forward. But in most of the stock in Westminster, Islington, Camden, your Georgian terrace house and your Victorian terrace house has a lot of potential, as do Victorian villas, etc., subject to it being a good design and really sitting well with the building. I think the issues are making sure that you can get to the space safely, particularly if it's going to be a new unit. And what we're finding is climate change is also potentially an issue with overheating. So, those, I think, are issues which will need to come forward and be addressed in years to come, probably with our structural engineering colleagues, assistants and architects. So, thanks.
Thank you. Charles Rez, did you have any point to add on the basement point, or...?
Yeah, just to kind of reiterate Claire's point on structural suitability, absolutely reserve capacity is likely to be present within a lot of these existing residential properties in existence within London, but across the country as a whole. I wouldn't imagine great difficulty, adding 1 or 2 stories, and probably would require a much less intensive intervention versus a basement. Probably reduce disruption, but then also there's the sustainability aspect of that I'm sure we'll come on to later, with the excavation associated with the basement, with the strengthening of foundations, with the concrete that ultimately has to be poured in to make that basement space watertight. If you think about that as a material impact or an embodied carbon impact, it's evident that a lightweight timber or modularised off-site manufactured extension solution will have a lower material impact and a lower embodied carbon impact because of that. So not only can it be delivered with less disruption, but it would also potentially have a lower embodied carbon, which we know GLA referable projects would be required to assess, and then if not hit a target, but also an increasing number of boroughs introducing that assessment requirement or targets for embodied carbon for retrofits or modifications of properties. So irrespective of it being the right thing to do, there are other instruments that would mean an extension would be preferable in terms of embodied carbon versus a basement.
I wanted to add that basements do come with issues in respect to habitability. They can be damp, they can lack light, they can be difficult to sort of access as well. So actually they can create all kinds of problems. They've got to be done well, and they can also change the street environment if you have to create light wells at the front. So there are many things that need to be taken into account, particularly if you're thinking about increasing basements for housing, particularly. So, yeah.
That's all piling in on basements. I wasn't going to, but I mean, to put more. I mean, I agree and won't repeat the points, but just put more punchily or sharply, perhaps. If we're relying on basements, which are very expensive and difficult things to do to deliver new bits of home, something's not working, because no one rationally would choose to do this very expensive, difficult thing if there was if the more obvious option, which has been eloquently explained, were legally, rationally doable. So it's a sign of, I would argue, of sort of planning and market failure if we're over relying on basements.
Thank you very much. Assemblymember Hamdash.
Great, thank you. Dr. Ushausen, I'm sorry, I've got that wrong slightly. I just wanted to follow up about your study about Camden. In terms of the kind of new properties and bedrooms provided, do you have a sense of what breakdown that would be by tenure? Like, will it be private homes? Would it be social housing? Do you have a sense of where those homes would kind of come under tenure?
Are you referring to the Apex airspace study? So that was that model was based on approaching local authorities to provide social housing. So we have done a project in Southwark for them, where we looked at an existing building, Anthony and Roderick, and we did provide a purely social housing scheme, which turned out to be very, very tricky because it was very difficult to develop it with keeping residents in situ. So the model was, and we have actually, I mean, my team has delivered over 30 projects, for example, with Islington Council, and some of those we have explored the potential of rooftop development on some of their existing estates to intensify and to provide more social housing. The problem is that the delivery model, you have to be very clear on the delivery model. You can't design rooftop extension and then post-decision decide you want to deliver this through a modular. If you go along the modular route, you have to design for modular and you have to design for that particular product. So, and what we have also come across is actually that the way in which the work was procured, it turned out that they would have needed 2 different developers to work either on the rooftops and then the infill, and it became very complex.
One of my other hats that I wear is actually as an Islington councillor.
I recognise you.
So I am aware that, unfortunately, you know, Islington Council has decided that that kind of development is unfortunately unviable. I also am aware of round the corner Coniston House, that East End homes have been developing, which was going to be the biggest airspace development in Europe, that unfortunately has turned out very badly, where residents have been left with damp, mould, and very dire structural complaints. I'm sure I'll be coming to that later. Nicholas, I was just going to ask, really helpful to have that sense of how many bedrooms and homes could be provided. Do you have a sense from your research how many people have the money, capacity and time to deliver on those homes? It's one thing for it to be architecturally possible, but how much demand is there for those type of extensions?
Very good question, thank you. 2 thoughts. One, we do have some case studies. So in fact, I think some people involved with one of them are in the room, if I understand correctly. In fact, the first and in many ways the most impressive was the bravest. So using a combination of supplementary planning documents and local development orders in Haringey, South Tottenham, in Tower Hamlets, and in Kensington and Chelsea, a series of mechanisms have been put in place that do effectively to do, I guess, what I'm saying implicitly in my earlier question, and all of them reveal a very high latent demand. In London, I mean, I think if we're having this conversation in sort of Stockport, we'd be having a different conversation. But the differential, even now, with obviously increased construction costs and flatlining property costs, the differential in construction between the pure cost of construction, and not all the planning and all that stuff around it, plus the value of additional bedrooms, should in many cases remain quite high. So we've seen from the people doing this, and let me get the numbers in front of me rather than make them up. But I don't know the latest, but in RBKC, which was quite small, only 12 properties, within less than 18 months, half of them were doing it. I suspect that's gone up now, but I don't know off the top of my head. Within South Tottenham, many hundreds of homes extended upward 1 or 2 stories in consequence. And in Tower Hamlets, I've forgotten the number, but I will find it and tell you. But it's a similarly order of magnitude increase in number of applicants. So that implies, because those are 3 quite different bits of London in terms of sociology and location, that implies that quite a few. And my part observation, part prediction would be that as this became normalised, if every council was doing it for certain set typologies, which is legally possible, and I would encourage you to help, I may say, then more and more, and this is, I think, a really good, attractive part of the project, more and more SMEs and local builders would get good at doing this. They'd go around dropping things. They'd probably do opportunities where they say, look, we can get going. If we do it alongside your neighbour at the same time, all the 2 of you, we can take the price down. So I think a market would develop quite quickly, actually, which would make it more available to more and more people. Would it be everyone? No. Would everyone want to do it? No, nor should they. No one should be forced to do this. But this is a way of sustainably growing without requiring heavy new infrastructure in a way that I think would cascade over time. So I think after 100 years, I think everyone would have done it. But, that's also beyond our immediate concerns.
I think take-up in South Tottenham, was around 60% from the last figures I had. Assemblymember Boff.
Thank you. I wonder if you could clear up some of the numbers that have been used. I'm quite familiar with the airspace from 10 years ago, the 180,000. I remember that being publicised at the time. And with Mr. Boyd-Smith's 140,000, but then Dr. Gillett comes in and says 500,000. Am I misunderstanding, or perhaps you could explain either it's a different thing you're reporting or a different methodology, because there's quite a gap.
Yeah, I think fundamentally they are quantifying different things. The piece of research that I cited from the University of Sheffield was essentially a bottom-up approach where it would assess every individual property on essentially a map, if you view it that way, and based upon attributes about that property would understand whether that would be eligible for extension through permitted development right. That doesn't take account for, like you say, the tenure of the property, whether the financial setup of whoever is living in the property would make that viable. It simply accounts for whether it meets the pre-prescribed set of rules that enable it to be eligible for permitted development extension. So you could think of it as an upper bound for that planning instrument.
So it's a physical possibility.
Yes.
And then the other figures are more about practicality with the current system. Is that correct?
If I can just add to that, it's typology that you need to look at. When we did our study, we looked at flat roofs in particular because they are very easy to extend, essentially. If you then throw in homes, terraces, semi-detached homes, I think you can get a much higher number. And that is what I meant by, at the beginning, the full potential in terms of different typologies of solutions, I don't think has really been tested. I haven't looked at Nicholas's latest piece of work or the Historic England report, which I would be very keen to see. But so if you start looking at local authorities and their housing stock in terms of terraced homes, so we did do one project for Populo where they wanted, because there is permitted development rights. So you can extend your terraced home to 40 cubic meters or your semi-detached home to 50 cubic meters. But what they want to do is raise the ridge height slightly higher so that they could create a proper further level and therefore address overcrowding, which of course is something else where this could really come to play, is huge overcrowding across London, so you don't constantly have to move families. So and that was very much opposed by the council, but it has huge potential because it is an easier way for a registered social landlord to expand the capacity of their properties.
Sorry, Mr. Paulson.
It was just to respond to the sort of the factual bit of your question. I would echo what you just said about Populo, and the PD rights should be increased for that. So the research we did is different. It's looking at every single property, actually in the country, but we looked in specifically at London. It's breaking them up by the typology, whether they're terraced, semi-detached, bungalow, flats, by the date. That's factual. I mean, those are just numbers. I mean, doubtless there are a few riddles in the data, but those are numbers. But then the judgment and then we're assuming that you go beyond PD. So we've made a series of assumptions. I'll literally just read one out at random. On a pre-1914 flat, our standard assumption was an additional storey was feasible with an average of 4 flats. That's obviously an assumption, and we don't pretend it's anything else. And this is the bit which massively changes the numbers, depending on what you believe. Our low-end estimate for take-up was 0.5% for that, because we recognise it can be quite difficult, and our upper end was 1.5%. We're actually making very, very conservative, small c, assumptions for take-up. One might argue they're too conservative, but we'd rather err on that side than oversell the policy. But we're even making very modest assumptions about take-up if you take out planning risk, and if you make it something that people can make a rational judgment, is this something I want to do or not, then spatially, across the UK, as we're talking numbers, we got a 1.7 to 3.7 million homes range, and within London, we got 141,000 to 321,000 homes. That is I'm not saying that will happen tomorrow, and currently that won't happen.
And sorry to be sort of geekish about the figures. So these are figures for number of homes, not number of bedrooms. In all cases. So actually the number of bedrooms could be considerably.
We also estimated number of bedrooms, which we do think matters a lot, and for London got a range of 302,000 to 679,000, which obviously greater than that.
So we're actually, Dr. Gillett says that this is the logical, the theoretical limit. We're actually talking about a figure between, say, 150 and 200,000 would be a good guess. Is that about right? Dr.
Yes. I would like to be slightly cautious in the sense that no one in London at the moment would consider building beyond 18 metres if you just extend to the rooftop because of viability and the difficulty with then providing a secondary stair and retrofitting sprinklers. So that needs to be taken into account with that estimation. I also think it's important to look at the fabric, as Charles have said, of the buildings. Can they last another 30 years? And then I just want a smaller other point that we have come across actually looking for clients at some of these buildings. Existing telecommunications equipment have long lease rights, and they actually affect health if they're not raised at the same time in terms of the roof level, which could have implications in terms of street appearance of these properties.
If I may just come in. So I agree with all those statements as factual statements. I don't think it's that important for the overall opportunity, London or UK-wide, in the sense that the real game here is not big changes on big blocks of buildings. Actually, that's what we've been quite good at doing over the last 70 years. The real opportunity here, if we as a polity and as a country wish to take it, is to allow streets, by which I mean terrace, semi-detached, detached houses, the normal web and weave of English streets, is to allow them organically to grow again in a way that are acceptable to the local population. That's what we've turned off for as long as any of us in this room have been alive. And certainly on our numbers, and I think also conceptually, that's the opportunity rather than, I mean, I'm not decrying what your work, but sort of that's where the real numbers are, certainly in our analysis. And
finally, I'm sorry to belabour this, Chair. I know it's a bit detailed. When you went on about the PD rights, under current PD rights, what is the potential? Because that's the real.
The potential would be that 500,000 number, but that is the
just using.
Yeah, but if you applied a 1.5%, 2.5% uptake, you could factor that by that. But it's highly sensitive to that assumption of
just
uptake.
Using the current PD rights.
Yes.
Where there shouldn't be too much bureaucracy because they're permitted development. We're talking about a potential of 500,000, but more likely 100,000 or so.
So the thing with, and I'm happy to be corrected. I'm happy to correct you on this because I've actually not looked at the PD uptick recently, so I speak under correction from my colleague. I mean, PD is not working as well as it should do in many circumstances whenever you require prior approval, because there's less planning understanding from planning advisors or from members of local authority, officials in local authorities. And absent lack of prior approval and absent clarity as to what can or can't happen, it's just not cutting through in the way that it should. So one of the reasons that we Create Streets put focus on local development orders and having the policy visually through a design code is to try and take away some of the uncertainty that PDs have not been as effective as removing as, you know, in principle one would hope it would. I'm happy to be corrected on that.
No, totally agree. And to reiterate the same point with the numbers that came out of the study we spoke about earlier, the potential nationally through the permitted development rights came out at 2 million, and we know that uptake has been closer to 1,000. So to give the scale of difference between potential and uptake on PDRs is very significant. So that 500,000 is the equivalent of that upper bound, and you can scale that right down to 1%, 2%, 2.5% in terms of actual uptake.
If I may, sorry, probably the Chair's going to call us in soon, but just last one, because I think it does matter. I can't remember the numbers off the top of my head, but some years ago, I looked at the national uptake of various types of permitted developments, you know, by the various class. And from more from memory, I'm certain this is correct, at the time, a couple of years ago, there was a very, very visible and sharp distinction between uptake for PD that did and didn't require prior approval. Basically, you need to give it to the council and they do or don't say yes. It was very, very stark in the data when I saw it a couple of years ago.
Thank you. Thank you for your indulgence, Chairman.
Assemblymember Lord Bailey.
Thank you, Chair. Just to reiterate Nicholas's point about the delivery of bedrooms, I do think the conversation does not talk enough about how bedrooms prevent homelessness. That is very, very important. And when we write about this, when we make our recommendations, I personally, Chair, would ask for that to be a big part of the conversation as to why this might be done. Because the idea that this will only benefit houses in Fulham is normally the pushback as to why these things are not done. So I think that's a very important point. To what extent have changes to the permitted development rights and the national planning policy framework encourage upward extensions been a success in London? That's the point here. Has it been a success in London? If I start with Dr. Gillott and Governor Gillott and go from there.
I think we answered some of that in the previous question. Not a fantastic success. We know that extensions are now much more commonplace than they were maybe 5-10 years ago, but we know that a lot of those extensions aren't being delivered through permitted development rights. They are some of the larger scale on a more engineered building rather than someone in a terraced house or a detached house extending their own property off their own back. It's more of a developed and integrated engineering extension that we see.
Okay. Is there a reason for this? Is it planning committees getting involved? Is it cost? You know, is it tradition? To our other Dr. Easthausen, what do you sense the reason there's been little or no success even with these changes here in London?
I think it is cost. So if you look at your normal homeowner, it's only some people who would be able to afford it and to go beyond. So go for the more interesting structural solutions and go the full planning route. Because you are quite limited in what you can do through permitted development right, and even then you have to get prior approval for a loft extension, for example. Nicholas mentioned design codes. My feeling is that if there is much more overt, because there is support for small sites particularly in the new draft NPPF. Infill development, it's recognised that in London to achieve the number of homes we need to achieve, we have to look at every single source of delivery. I think if you look at more detailed work, and I think English or Historic England have looked at this typology work of specific typologies and what could be the solution. And if there is support, more policy support for it to be grabbed at a larger scale by property owners. So I'm thinking specifically RSLs, local authorities that also own a lot of terraced homes, housing stock. For example, we just did a piece of work for Slough, looking at their neighbourhoods where they have lots of families in multi-family accommodation. Then I think it would be more successful.
Claire, if I come to you, do you have any understanding of why, for instance, most of the buildings that have been done this way have almost exclusively been outside of London? Is that your experience, and is there a reason for that?
It's really difficult for me to comment on that because we've only seen a few come to us for consultation in the last few years. I have to say my recollection of them was generally because they're post-1947 and to 2018, that they weren't particularly heritage assets. And a lot of them we didn't raise any concerns with because they didn't impact on the setting of heritage assets. There must be other reasons out there, and it's possibly worth thinking of doing some kind of study, or, to see why they didn't get through the system. However, I'm aware that many that have come through just getting planning permission, because ultimately, if they don't get it under the PD rights, they can get planning permission. And we see many schemes coming forward, heritage assets and non-heritage assets, that actually do deliver upwards housing. Our report has some examples of that which sort of range from sort of 20th century modern estates, which are social housing where they put a couple of floors on it, for example, to listed buildings such as a fire station where somebody actually built into the roof and repurposed the roof space. That was at Belsize Park. So it is entirely possible, but it seems that most of the time it's coming in through the planning system, and that then allows the planning system to manage, govern, etc., and ensure that those properties are well designed and good for living in, so and appropriate to their heritage context. So, as I said, I only know of the sort of good examples rather than why others didn't get through the alternative process.
Let me put this in, Nicholas, and then the whole panel. So is the planning process actually delivering here? Is the planning process allowing people to do things that are innovative, that are sustainable, and actually the permitted development rights have been largely irrelevant to at least what people are trying to achieve now? And should the permitted development rights be changed in order to accommodate easier delivery, cheaper delivery, more speedy delivery of these things?
Thank you, Lord Bailey. A couple of quick points. So one, there are two reasons in my judgment and in our work as to why PD has not had the consequence it should have done, or we would have hoped it would have done. One of which actually Claire has already just touched on, which is because it only affects buildings from 1948 onwards, the types of buildings where it's sort of particularly, the ones I was just talking about, where in principle it should be particularly easy to add a story, a terraced house with a strong cornice or cornice line, it's very easy to add an extra story without anyone sort of literally noticing, let alone complaining. Basically, nearly all of those are pre-1948. Most of them are pre-1900. So there's literally a sort of a contradiction, if you like, between the dates and the typology that this should have most effect on. I mean, you can. There's a lot you could already do through PD at the back of, more recent, bigger houses, detached houses. So it's not as big a change as it sort of seemed. It's worth saying that the other biggest change in principle that happened a few years ago, obviously, was the change wording in the NPPF. It came through, I think, the last NPPF change of Michael Govan, which was then essentially repeated with a few tiny tweaks in the first NPPF change of this government. So that has had an effect. We did some analysis, I think about 6 months ago, just for London, where we looked at the inner London boroughs. It hadn't had a huge effect on volume coming forward. I was saying about the same as I was saying earlier in the 500s, 600s in every sort of period. We looked at the 23 months and 21 months, I think, before and after the change. It had a big consequence for the probability of it being accepted on appeal, which is via the planning system. So local authorities approval went up from 80 to 85%, but the real change was at the planning inspectorate, because obviously they know the law better on the whole. sorry for local planning authorities, where it got up from 17 to 42%. So it has had an effect. It's not to be, gainsaid or poo-pooed. Those two changes together have been effective, but where it's really had effect is when you've then got a local council coming in and either through an SPD or an LDO, and then with an associated design code, really turbocharging it. That's where you see the exponential increase in provision of additional bedrooms, or in some cases of homes.
Chair, we should look at where the NPPF affects the date of the houses that permitted development rights would make it easier, because Nicholas's clear point about the actual physicality of the buildings and the ability to do that. So if I was to ask any of you, magic wand, what change you would make to permitted development rights to facilitate this? I think Nicholas has indicated one. Is there another 2, 3, 4 that you suggest might be useful?
Maybe not a magic wand and one change that will solve the entire situation, but we see that the success rate for permitted development prior approvals for extensions is in the order of magnitude of 50%. Now, for an instrument that is supposed to be presumption of approval, that is obviously not presumption of approval. 50% success rate for a development that is supposed to be prior approved is very, very low. That would suggest that prior approval process or the assessment of suitability within that prior approval process is far too stringent. And actually, that's why people will defer and go through a full planning approval route, because if you have to have a very specific typology, you can only add one story, and you've got to add that story in the exact materiality of what you've already got in your existing building, and you've still only got a 50% chance of success. Why would you not go through a full planning permission route? And similarly, because that prior approval process is so onerous, it's not actually that much more costly to go through full planning than it is to go through that prior approval process. So it's not functioning in the light touch assessment that it's supposed to function as.
Right. Okay.
May I just add one point? I passionately agree with that comment. And I just sort of, I think the concept of prior approval, if it's not very set down with tick box, is inherently flawed. And I know from talking personally to officers and to planning consultants, almost by definition, very few of them have got any experience, or they've only got very little experience of prior approval. So any planning consultant who wants to know what he or she's talking about will basically say, go for planning permission, because I've done thousands of those and I've done 2 prior approvals in the last 15 years. So because there's no folk memory in either the public or the private sector, other than in a few little bits, it's just not taken off in the same way. So the concept of prior approval is inherently flawed. And I can come back later when I'm talking about LDOs in more detail as a different suggestion how to do it.
Okay, Chair. I think.
Assemblymember Boff.
Thank you. The GLA sought views on a London-wide small sites design code back in 2025. Could this help unlock the potential for upwards extensions? And I know, Mr. Boyd-Smith, you've touched on this already in design code, so perhaps you could just repeat what you said. I mean.
Taking it at the GLA level, and again, I have to be corrected by the mayoral development order is. I'm so sorry. Forgive me. Taking this at the GLA level, mayoral development orders are obviously they have to be, which is similar to a local development order, has to be constrained by red line, by being site specific. So there's a sort of tension between that and having a small sites policy that is London wide. You could envisage. Now that there's much better data available, we've done research on it, so people like Russell Curtis, on where all these small sites are. So we've got a better sense of that than we've ever had before. You could imagine a situation where you, the GLA, said to the local, I don't know, well, encourage local authorities to make use of either supplementary plans or LDOs, and you said, well, look, we've got our small sites policy, we've got our pattern books. If within X period of time you haven't got this in place, we, the Mayor, with the GLA support, would put in place a mayoral development order, for the following types of site drawn across London, and here's some pattern books that we work up in advance. I was just talking to an official outside beforehand. Houses built in 1890 in Bromley or in Haringey are highly likely to be quite similar. So I think you can imagine a pattern book which may not be perfect, but which would be good enough. The trick is you don't go into the insides. You don't start telling people how many bedrooms they have, whether they have 1 bedroom or 2. You keep out of the insides. It has to obey building regs. You don't need to worry about that. You just have a predefined upper limit, what's visually acceptable, just something that most people will accept, and that's very easy to discover now through visual preference surveys. And in every single study we've ever done in this country and a few internationally, you get between 70 and 90% of support for some stuff that just feels like it's from round here, which is incredibly easy visually to define. So you could imagine that the small sites policy will only achieve anything if you keep out of the inside of buildings, if you keep it short and visual, and then if you then either via the local councils or via the GLA, councils in a way would be preferable, but because I don't want to say weaponise because that could be misquoted, misunderstood, but you've got to give it teeth. And you put in place an LDO or an MDO process where you've got the order, the upfront permission, you've then got a site passport, which is literally tick box. It's not that prior approval nightmare, and then you just got a confirmation of compliance. So we did this actually, We Create Streets, in Chesham. Interestingly, and I think I may have sent the details on this to officials before, annoyingly Bucks County Council then killed it because they didn't want it to happen for reasons I can go into later. But, the template exists to how to do something that fits a local code, fits local policy, bringing the democracy forward into either the local plan or the GLA plan, and then within that carapace allows people to create homes and create bedrooms, which we so desperately, desperately need.
Ms Brady, does that give enough granularity to decisions about updating what could be heritage buildings?
Yeah, I think we were supportive of the small sites design guidance that came out. And I think it creates a good template for taking forward particularly sort of local SPD documents, etc., that can potentially inform extensions to residential properties. What we really need is to be absolutely sure that it takes into account the character of those local areas. You could create some pattern books at a high level that could be used as templates but they would be very much needed to be adapted to the local context. In conservation areas and with listed buildings, you might need an extra layer of detail. Certainly the LDO in Kensington is exceptionally detailed, as is the Stamford Hill and the Tower Hamlets documents. But there are other typologies across London, you know, the typical 1930s and the typical 1950s house, where there are a lot of common features that could be, you know, taken forward as pattern booking and form a sort of local design code. But yes, it does really need to be sort of borough-led, we think, because they're the people that understand the actual architecture and context, and also the people that live locally and what their wants and needs are. For example, I think it would be really interesting to see how many SPDs and sort of local design codes come forward in the next few years as a result of this. There haven't been many so far. I think Bexley's just brought one out, and that looks quite, you know, positive for upwards extensions and gives people a good idea about what they can do, looking at their particular types of development that they have in Bexley. So, you know, obviously Bexley isn't everywhere, but there are other boroughs could do similar based on that kind of you know, document.
It's quite difficult to be objective about character, isn't it, in any kind of document. But you did allude to the fact that the local community should be involved. Is this a policy that might be, you know, such developments be aided by the street votes that I know Mr. Boyd-Smith is very keen on? Anybody else? I mean, yeah.
Obviously, your new document talks about street votes, but they're yet to come into force. So it'll be really interesting to see if they actually do produce any sort of new permissions as a result of that. A lot of upfront work's obviously required, so it's going to be suck it and see. Let's see if anyone actually takes this up, because you do need good examples to be brought forward. But I think you've thought more about its practical application, haven't you?
Very quickly, I mean, street voting's on about to happen because the government hasn't made the secondary legislation, so nothing's going to happen until that changes. It is a shame because it was all sort of ready to go and it stopped. So, you know, we don't know how to solve our housing crisis in London or in this country, because if we did, we'd have done it by now. So my view is all levers that are rational and are not unfair to people should be tried. I think there's a good case to make for actually doing things as simpler than street votes, but street votes are a form of hyper-local democracy. Probably, I think there's good reason to believe, would encourage actually more intensification in given streets where people have enough social capital to make it happen, and who would say no to that? And if it takes off, that'd be great. If it remains slightly niche and you're using changing planning or local development orders to do things perhaps a little bit less ambitiously in a wider range of places, I think that's fine too. I genuinely don't know which way that would come out, but I know I want to try both, so we can try and create some of the homes we desperately need.
You know, I do find that things are more effective when it is actually local government bringing them forward. You know, when you rely on locals to bring forward plans, etc., there can be difficulties, disagreements, particularly when you have to have a collegiate design. So actually, a local authority very much leading from the front with LDOs, DCOs, etc., can ensure that they are effective and delivered. And they also have a requirement to consult with people locally. So, you know, it's looking at effectiveness of tools and what you can bring forward. SPDs are brilliant tools as well. Obviously, there's going to be some change in they're being deleted, but there will be other forms that can be brought forward to help guide and people on what the right thing is to do to get a planning permission if a permission is necessary. So.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Assembly Member Hamdash.
Great, thank you. I will say, you know, having a councillor inbox, these roof extensions don't go without complaints sometimes. So there is definitely, you know, sometimes people have a lot of opinions. So, are there specific factors that are making upwards extensions more difficult to deliver in London? And we'll start on this side of the panel.
Well, I think the discussion that was just had, if we look at design codes, there are actually existing planning tools that can be used. So we don't have to reinvent the planning system. I think more detailed work needs to be done around design codes. And then I think typical solutions. And then I think parties will step forward with innovative solutions. Doing infill development, doing small developments. I mean, my team have done a number of infill homes in back gardens, very innovative with award-winning architects, very, very difficult to achieve planning permission. I have one project that's just got planning permission after 3 planning applications and 2 appeals. It's a very small, fantastically designed home, and we shouldn't underestimate the impact that the interpretation of character has on these applications, which is very differently interpreted across different local authorities. I worked on a project that was dismissed at an appeal, and the interpretation of the planning inspector of what character is in a 1960s suburban context is homes need to have a front and a back garden. It's not true. It's not actually what contributes to character. I think we need to understand what it is and what actually contributes to positive contributions to character. It's one of the main issues. I think we will see changes from October onwards. Some of these smaller applications need to be determined through wouldn't go to planning committee. So I think that might have an impact. There is going to be a change, the new DeepMind Google AI tool for householder applications. What effect is that going to have on these type of applications? And therefore maybe very specific rules about typical solutions in for typical typologies might be a very good thing to look at.
I would find it difficult from my own experience to speak to specific barriers in London, but from significant research, again, that we carried out at the University of Sheffield, the main barrier that came out again and again in this was uncertainty. And that would be both technical uncertainty, so uncertainty surrounding, can the engineer find the reserve capacity within this building? Can the structural engineer sign this off? But more than that, financial and economic uncertainty. Will I get a return on investment for this vertical extension? Now, compare that with a new build development or a demolish and rebuild case, or picking a greenfield or brownfield land site adjacent. It's not that the extension will be more costly and you are less likely to get your return on that investment. It's more that the process of costing that is uncertain, and so it's unclear whether that return will be made. In the case of a new construction, that's something that we deliver all day, every day, again and again and again. We know that that return will be made. With the extension, that's not the case. Now, I wouldn't expect that to be as much as an issue within London and Greater London as we see across the rest of the country, and actually we see a greater prevalence of extensions here in London because of land values and so forth than we do in the rest of the country. But that is the overriding barrier that we see again and again, uncertainty, both technically and economically.
I think, as Prue said previously, I don't particularly see heritage as a barrier. Obviously the properties that Create Streets have been looking at, Georgian Victorian housing, suburban housing, is not a particular barrier in most cases to upwards extension. Heritage assets can, in many cases, be sensitively extended. There are cases where they cannot. And I think we have to accept that some reforms are very beautiful, decorative, important, and therefore should not be altered or changed. And there are views of things that we really cherish and want to retain as well, where upwards extensions might actually cause harm and prevent you seeing something that you really need to see. So, but in many cases, providing the significance of the heritage asset is understood, and we have good architects and sensitive owners, we can often find a good solution. As I said, our report is very much focusing on those good examples. And, not seeing it as a particular barrier, but a challenge. And as I said, it might not always be the case. Sometimes we've looked at alternatives on the site, rear extensions, adjacent extensions, etc. But each case on its own merits. And as I said, I've worked on literally dozens of roof extensions where we've actually successfully delivered new accommodation.
Thank you before I answer your question, I forgot to say something to Lord Bailey before, so if you'll just give me 30 seconds. On the important point about bedrooms, there was a very good study on that done in Works in Progress a couple of months ago, which we summarised in one of our papers, and I'll send to officials both just before I forget. Sorry. I'm going to constructively, I hope, agree with one of the things that's just been said and disagree politely and respectfully with two. I mean, just to sort of bring out some debate, hopefully in a useful way. So I would underline triply what Charles just said about uncertainty. I've got a confession to make. In a previous career, I was a banker. Don't throw me out of the room. And that teaches you, if it teaches you anything, the importance of the cost of money and the cost of capital. And if you don't get planning permission when you've just spent £20,000 trying to get it, you've just smoked that money. Very, very few people can afford to do that. And that's why de-risking development in a way that is locally acceptable is so important. So even before you get to the economic risk, which is less the case here in the UK, in London, though actually the flat property market has been problematic recently, you've got to find ways to de-risk development in ways that are politically, locally acceptable. It all comes down to that. You've got to bring the democracy forward. And not really disagreeing with what was said about character, but if we're getting into a case-by-case, each case on its merits, debate about whether this is or isn't out of character, that may be appropriate for a very important extension to a Grade 1 listed building or a very, very high value sociologically place. Absolutely, that case-by-case specificity has its place, and I would support it. I think we have to accept that most of London is not unique. Rows of houses, late Victorian, early 20th century, even actually early Victorian or even late Georgian, there are hundreds of others like it. We've got to bring the democracy forward. We're desperately short of homes. It may create a little bit of rough justice just around the edges in a few cases, and say, look, for these butterfly roofs, none of the slates on this will be early 19th century. You may have some early 19th century Scandinavian deal hanging the roof up. Frankly, probably not. It'll probably be 20th century. But, yep, there are probably 6 or 7 bits of early 19th century Scandinavian deal in there, but maybe not. They're going to go. I think we can cope with it. I mean, I used to be Commissioner of Historic England. I'm passionately pro-heritage. I really think we can live without those 7 or 8 slices of Scandinavian deal that no one's looked at for 200 years. Other than the too few people who go up into the roof and sort of, knock their heads. So I think we've got to de-risk development in the good ordinary cases, so we're not getting into ultimately meaningful but ludicrous arguments about character, and so we just allow people to start upward extending. I think it all comes down to risk. And just one final point, never, never, never forget how odd the English planning system is in comparative terms. We've created a much higher... We're running a Rolls-Royce system on sort of, Vauxhall Corsa resources, and that's not about to change. We're running a very nuanced, thoughtful, expert, with great people like Claire, policing it. We just can't do that for every single development, every single problem. We've got to define the good enough, which will be good enough in 99% of cases, and let us start building again within that acceptable political carapace.
Great. I do actually have some follow-up questions, but Chair, I need to duck out for a second for a comfort break. I don't know whether you could take the next question and I come back a little...
Yeah, we can do that.
But I'll be 2 seconds, sorry.
Assembly Member Baker.
Thanks. My question is to Claire specifically. Other members of the panel might have something to contribute as well. So, I mean, you've hinted towards this quite a lot in sort of saying that heritage doesn't need to be a drag on development in certain ways. But your recent report specifically noted that the development of the New London Plan is an opportunity to reinforce London's identity by learning from its high-density historic places. So could you talk a bit more about that, about what we can learn from London's past about how upwards extensions could work? Oh, hey.
Available in all good bookshops.
I'll flash the report. It's actually on our website now. So it was in partnership with Allies and Morrison, architects who are very accomplished. Basically, we have, the biggest finding actually is that the middle of London, the historic heart of London, Westminster, Camden, Kensington, etc., the terrace houses and the dense urban nature actually provides fantastic places to live and is some of the highest density residential accommodation that we have. So it's these places that really provide us with a very sort of good impetus of what good development looks like, what good high density residential development can be. They're desirable places to live, you know, the terrace house and the mansion block, etc. And they could provide us with a really good idea about how to create new high density housing elsewhere. And I know there's another debate about mid-rise that the Assembly's also been looking at. But it can give us ideas about also how to extend. Many of these properties are pattern booked, you know, so they will have come with original extensions at roof level, or there are recognised ways of doing them. I mean, we've realised across London there are nuances. So, for example, the Tower Hamlets upwards extension guide has very particular details about those types of houses, like the bottle balustrades and stuff like that, and the Kensington ones, and the details of the windows. But overall, there are a lot of commonalities about certainly upwards extensions on your typical terrace house, Georgian, and your Victorian terrace house and your villa house in the middle of London. So these can obviously accommodate new development. We're also sort of thinking the social housing estates that are in the middle of London and further out. Peabody estates, for example, are very high density. A lot of them as well are thinking about their roof extensions and extending the properties and infilling estate. Infills and extensions are quite significant. The programmes that are happening across London, certainly in sort of Southwark and Islington and Hackney. And, you know, these are fantastic ways of getting more people to live on a site in the middle of the heart of the city. So looking at existing patterns of terraces, streets, squares, ways of actually urban design can be a fantastic way of informing the future and creating more good places to live in the future, particularly when sites come up for redevelopment or when you're looking at extending a building, particularly upwards. I mean, as I said, there are numerous examples in the publication, and I've dealt with numerous examples. Many heritage buildings do actually have roofs. As I said, I've dealt with a number of schemes where people have actually extended into the roofs where the void is. I was on site yesterday at Trent Park at a building where actually an additional 7 flats have gone into the roof space. So that's more accommodation being created there. Often they can be created on tight streets using setbacks and, you know, other formulaic things like extending the architecture upwards so it fits comfortably within the streetscape. Sometimes a highly contemporary approach is acceptable as well. We've seen many cases where that's actually worked really well, particularly where the loading is limiting what can actually go on top of the building. But for me, it's really making sure that the architecture of the host building is actually retained and sensitively adapted, and that you can secure other benefits to the asset itself and to the local area through improvements. I think some of the guidance notes actually say if you're going to do this, you should improve the front of your house, reinstate features that are being lost, pay some money into a street improvement scheme. So you can actually create other public benefits, which I know there are questions about upwards extensions for houses and public benefits. I think associating that with heritage benefits is a really fantastic thing and can justify any harm that might arise through some loss of historic fabric. You were talking about some butterfly roofs. So, yeah. But, you know, in terms of my day-to-day work, we see a lot of roof extensions that we get consulted on, and I'd say we probably don't get involved in more than 5–10% of those because the local authorities know what they're doing, and actually they are fairly formulaic in terms of their proposals. Most terrace properties will have a good example in their street that people can go and look at and copy, and that's quite, you know, yeah.
Thanks. Thank you. Yeah, that was a very comprehensive answer. I've got no follow-ups.
Thank you. We'll just go to Lord Bailey on this question and then revert back to some Member Hamdash.
Just to come to clear, and Dr. Oosterhausen maybe, are there any issues with doing this? Because I used to live on a street in Kensington, Chelsea, and it was very dense. Parking was an utter nightmare. If you ever parked on your own road, you then wouldn't move the car just because of the novelty. You knew where it was. It was close. And if you add an additional level of density, what about access? You know, does it make these places harder to come by? Can you get so dense that then you have issues around school provision, ambulances attending the place, getting people up and down the stairs? You know, where do those dramas fall into place?
Nicholas is obviously shaking his head. You know, those are less heritage issues and more planning issues. That's why I think with the permitted development rights for the upwards extension, they did, I mean, I looked, there were various things that they had to actually get approved as part of that pre-approval, like impacts on traffic, etc. I mean, as I said, that's why people have generally gone through the planning route, so that where you are creating more than a couple of units, you actually, you know, can manage and monitor that and place conditions on the planning permission. But yeah, we live in a dense city. People should be, sorry, this is personal opinion, you know, taking public transport, and, you know, density is good. It can create more opportunities for shared services, etc. But this is very much a planning issue, and I think should be put to somebody who is a planner. Okay. I don't know. Yeah.
Nicholas, maybe you have a stab, because I might. Again, I used to live in Kensington, Chelsea, and some of the best places, when you step back, are the most dense places, both in the social housing arena. Some of the estates worked because they were planned. Some were absolutely horrific, but some worked because they were planned properly. Some of the, for want of a better word, posher mansion blocks worked. But they are already planned. They were planned as is. Is an addition, is that easy to mitigate?
So the good news is that actually this is the much better way to manage those problems than the current process we're taking. So what do we currently do in London and in much of the UK, certainly in towns, because it is so difficult to do development. Development tends to get, it's either low density sprawl on fields, or it's very high density on a small site where essentially you can get away with it. It's an old brownfield site that used to be a supermarket or something or whatever, and we put basically the developers as much in there as they can possibly get away with. That's basically our current model. It's either fried egg or stick. The beauty of normalising organic growth of towns again. Sorry, I should say that creates, but those two models create enormous infrastructure consequences, because by definition, the sprawl, you know, you're going to need a new road. If it's 5 miles, 3 miles, 1.5 miles to the nearest school, it's going to come in with almost unavoidable infrastructure consequences all the whole way down the infrastructure pile. And likewise, if you're putting, you know, 2,000 new homes, you know, where there used to be a rubbish tip, you know, or a gasworks, that's the type of stuff we tend to do. That certainly creates very, very heavy infrastructure, immediate consequences in a very, very localised place. And quite rightly, people worry about that, and they're right to. And you'll recall the percentages I cited earlier for uplift, in terms of for uptake of a policy that de-risks. Certainly in the first few years, it would be quite low on a street-by-street basis. What we're doing here is we're spreading the development far more widely. So you might have 5 extra bedrooms in that street, 2 in that street, 7 in that street, whatever it might be. It'll be unpredictable to some degree, but it's not going to be dramatic in any one street. And as I'm sure you don't need me to tell you, right now the challenge for schools, or certainly most schools in London, is not too many children, it's too few. I would see this as the organic and perfect way to respond to that problem by making it easier to have children, or making it easier to have more families with extra bedrooms. So I think the schools problem is it's literally the opposite to a question, if I may be humbling, but have me say. And then specifically on traffic and cars, and I didn't know historically that had a perspective on these such matters. Specifically on cars, and I'm conscious this is an unavoidably controversial thing. Look, certainly in inner London, and I do a lot of work outside London. I think certainly in inner London, I think it's reasonable to say it doesn't come with extra car parking places. That won't be perfect for everyone, but this is additional homes and bedrooms. It doesn't come with extra car spaces. I think we can. That's fine. I think in outer London, I think that's more of a challenge. So I think there's a legitimate concern there, and I think you can imagine a situation, where if one street or a few streets are really intensifying, and you're in zone 4 or zone 5, so people are going to have cars probably, then I think you can imagine situations in which that would become something the council and fellow residents are going to start legitimately and reasonably to have a point of view on. So I think there's something I think to do further work on. How would you, at what point would you trigger that concern, where a legitimate understanding, a requirement for a car, for an intensifying outer suburban street evolving into Islington, if you like, typologically, is creating extra car use. I think that's a legitimate concern. I think other typologies in other bits of London, it's fine.
Cheers.
Assemblymember Hamdash.
Thank you for accommodating. So we're back on kind of challenges of this kind of development. So one of the points here is about fire safety regulations and what challenges those might throw up. I actually have a piece of casework where someone is trying to extend upwards and is in the process of negotiating with Islington Council about sprinklers, which has long delayed the project. Do you have a sense of what barriers there are when it comes to fire safety, particularly in the post-Grenfell context?
Well, I mean, I think I have mentioned it before. It is about fitting sprinklers in afterwards. A lot of floor-to-ceiling heights in some of the 1960s buildings in particular are quite low. And you would add 30 centimetres to the ceiling, fitting a sprinkler in, so that doesn't make it very suitable then for existing residents, and actually probably having quite a negative impact on their quality of life. So that is a barrier. If you go over 18 metres, you also need a second staircase. So you need to make sure the build form that you're looking at, that you can actually add a second staircase somewhere. It's not possible on all the properties that are available. Things like rubbish removal, recycling, cycle parking. I think there is some more flexibility stepping in with cycle parking, but that also needs to be considered if you're actually looking at not just singular properties, but actually maybe a flatted block of 4 stories that might have 20 properties in on a wider estate. It does have implications for that too.
I just have one very quick thing. I agree with that. I mean, I'm happy to be corrected on this. I haven't checked this before I answer this question, so modest caveat. But I don't believe it. I don't believe it's the case that in any of the upward extensions of a story or a story and a half to sort of like more normal terraced or semi-detached houses, I don't think any of that stuff. Certainly the staircases doesn't kick in. I don't think fire regs kick in further. No, you're correct confirming that. So again, I think it's one of the advantages of this is because you're doing more gentle intensification more widely. You don't get into these, understandably tense and difficult trade-offs on building regs. Just one final thing on rubbish, which I think I should. Obviously, there is a downside in the sense if you've got more people living in the same building, you're going to have more rubbish. That's more work for the council to do. But you should also actually be getting ultimately higher value properties, more activity within. If you're bringing streets back to life because you've got more people in them, I think it's legitimate to assume that down the line, that doesn't mean you haven't got some tensions en route. You're getting a more prosperous place, which can pay more tax.
Thank you. And just a final question from me, just to play up being the Green London Assembly member. Do you think there's an opportunity with mansard roofs to improve EPC ratings of housing? I'm conscious as well that the Haringey SPD says climate, like sustainability improvements to housing in this process, could be considered. Should they be considered?
I'm sorry, I can't resist myself coming in. Forgive me. So, I mean, I should have said this earlier. I sort of assumed it would come up, and I didn't want to repeat myself too much. So, I think this is one of the profound cases to be made for this type of intensification. Is that it allows you to take that elegant but not so important 19th century or early 20th century roof and massively improve its thermal efficiency. It's a huge win there for comfort as well as for sustainability and energy use. Of course, it's also a very sustainable development pattern that you're not creating additional infrastructure or growing London. So I think this is a sincerely green way of growing. And of course, you're making use of existing embodied carbon in the buildings. And I'm sure you know the statistic as a good green councillor. If you knock down a Victorian semi-detached house to build the best passive house you can imagine, you've burnt between 80 and 100 years of embodied carbon. So you need the best part of a century to get back to where you were. So, the greenest building is the one that already exists nearly always, not quite always, and there are exceptions to that.
Yeah, just when you stole on my line there, Nicholas.
Sorry.
The greenest building being the one that already exists. Yeah, just to reiterate that embodied carbon point, that we've recognised earlier that very few of these extensions are taking place as an isolated development. It's almost always as part of a wider refurb or retrofit. So not only is there the opportunity to make fabric upgrades, improving EPCs, but also to generally renovate properties and bring them up in terms of standard as part of that development. And yes, absolutely, utilising existing embodied carbon rather than introducing new. And to make a similar argument for that kind of gentle intensification, a high number of small extensions has a significantly lower embodied carbon impact in of itself than a small number of significant extensions. So adding 1-2 stories throughout the entirety of the city is much more sustainable from an embodied perspective than adding 6-7 stories on a couple of isolated apartment blocks dotted around. Yeah. Then you've got the kind of tertiary impacts on the infrastructure that we alluded to earlier. We are utilising existing grid, we're utilising existing roads, existing telecoms infrastructure, rather than generating a requirement for this. Now you've got sewer capacity and things like that, where you may have certain areas where these infrastructures are at capacity. It will generally be that there is reserve capacity within them, such as there is within the buildings, to add a small number of stories across a large area.
Just a quick follow-up. Oh, go on.
Sorry, I was just going to say, it can also be an impetus to actually bring forward the regeneration of historic buildings, those which currently don't have a purpose, where retrofit can be undertaken to bring forward residential uses, particularly in the upper floors of buildings, and creating new roof extensions. Some of the cross-subsidies can actually go into the refurbishment and upgrading of the principal building. So as a kind of package, it can actually work really well. And obviously, protecting the embodied carbon of the asset is also a very good thing.
Great. I mean, Paris, of course, is really famous for their mansard roofs, but there have been complications. So they're very famous for those beautiful zinc roofs that I hear are reaching 70 degrees in the current heat wave. And there's a real urgency of kind of responding to that. I do wonder whether SPDs that allow mansard roofs should provide guidance or clarity about what is the best way to deliver these homes. I'm also conscious that the mansard roofs potentially increase the likelihood of leaks if they're flat roofs. So I just wonder what should SPDs say in terms of how these extensions are built?
May I just come in quickly and apologise, Rose, I didn't properly answer the last bit of your question. Forgive me, it was stupidity, not desire to ignore you. Yes, my view would be avoid trying to get into the detailed inside design as much as possible of the building, because the whole point of this is different people want to do different things in their spaces. But in terms of the things that you can sort of count, you know, is it this material, is it that, and a high specificity for thermal efficiency, absolutely. So to answer your question, yes, they should. But don't say what, you know, keep at the shell, as it were. I mean, specifically on Paris, it's interesting, actually. I was looking at some of the debate. We do a little bit of work in France now, and I was looking at some of the debate there. This is a tangent, but I'll say it. So the key thing they need to do in Paris, and that will also be relevant here, of course, will be planting vast numbers of street trees, because they are astonishingly effective between 5 and 15 degrees at cooling existing streets. So, I mean, as an aside that you didn't ask about, I chucked that in there.
The other thing is the building regs will probably change. You know, they will require insulation, etc., and hopefully will take into account heat generated and loss of heat, etc., that we're experiencing with our current climate change. Water runoff, all the issues. Yeah, my loft is currently uninhabitable this time of year. So, you know, making sure that we build in things like solar shading, PVs where possible as well, and microgeneration.
Forgive me, so you prompted a thought. So hopefully not contradicting what I just said, but I think the important thing, so I agree with that point on building regs. I think one thing we see go wrong sometimes is where you've got well-intentioned planning policy having a point of view that's different to the building regs, or is in some cases contradicting it. So we would always urge, and sort of principles of good regulation, regulate for the same thing in one place, because the moment you've got, you know, local authority saying, and you've got the building regs, the potential for conflict then comes back to the point about risk, because then you've got a well-intentioned, you know, developer, house builder, local housing authority, whatever it might be. Literally, well, it says here this, it says this here. What do I do? I need a planning, and then you're back to the races of it all being complicated again. So, if the building regs say what they need to say, you don't need to repeat it. Don't gold plate it. certainly don't contradict it, because then I think you'll be making it harder again. We've got to change the system to make it easier to do this type of gentle intensification. So a little bit, regulatory risk has to be minimised whilst having clear standards.
Yeah. And just to say that upwards extensions to residential properties currently seem to be fairly compliant with current building regulations without too much change to the host property. I'm talking about residential buildings of between 2 to 3 stories. So, yeah.
Right, that's really helpful. I'm currently actually doing an investigation about overheating homes, so maybe we might need to just copy and paste some of that evidence that you've just given.
And obviously that last question was about barriers to upward extensions. One potential barrier, big barrier, is resident opposition. And Nicholas, I know you spoke at the committee before when we were looking to mid-rise units about the Croydon example, and the problem with that being that residents weren't brought along and it wasn't popular with residents, so it wasn't sustainable, even though it did lead to a really significant increase in the number of units. So when it comes to any potential design code, how local should those design codes be made? Because you could have a mayoral-wide design code, you could have each local authority having their own design code. I mean, Westminster, in my constituency, the design code you'd have in Queen's Park would be different to Little Venice, would be different to Marylebone. So how, I mean, for this policy to be effective, but also for it to be acceptable to residents, how wide should we be having these design codes?
I think they should follow character areas. So, for example, you need to think about what the character of that area is and be able to define it. So, for example, conservation areas, I'm not saying they should be subject to design codes, but local authorities are required to regularly carry out conservation area appraisals. And through doing it, they assess the heritage significance of that area and its special architecture and, special character. And they will come up with sort of policies for preservation, enhancement, etc. So that can be a really good opportunity to sort of define a character area. But we do also have a sort of character map for London as well that allows you to sort of go in and sort of drill down in certain character traits and places that could be used. But yeah, character is really important, and I think to understand the place is important to make things palatable to the people that live there. You need to be able to work with what the character of the place is. Not that the character should not change, it can change positively. But to bring people along with you, it's really important to understand it, that character. And that's why we do think some of this does need to be at a local level. In fact, particularly where it affects conservation areas and listed buildings, it probably should be delivered at the local level. Thanks.
Thank you.
Sorry. Thank you. A good question. So a couple of thoughts. One would be, this is not directly answering a question, but I think is an appropriate and necessary sort of prefigurement. Never underestimate the importance of what things look like to people's response to them at a pre-conscious level. So if you ask people, does it matter what a place looks like? You're going to have a fair portion of people will say yes, but they'll probably give you more functionalist, sort of high-status answers. Depending on their politics, it might be different things. But as recent work in America and some of our work shows, actually you get dramatically different responses to intensification on whether it feels like it's from here. People can cope with change, absolutely, I agree. But home, sense of character needs to evolve. People can cope with evolution. What they, on the whole, don't like is that sense of it being imposed from over there. And if you like, there's a left-wing and a right-wing version of this, which I would argue are quite similar, if you'll all forgive me. And something that is scars their sense of home and feels like it's imposed from abroad. So it does matter that you've got visual, simple, attractive codes, point one, they've got to be visual. Point two, yes, they've got to be very firmly based in evidence on what local people like. The good news is that has got dramatically easier and cheaper to do over the last decade. When I first set up Create Streets 12 years ago, doing a visual preference survey was a really big bit of work. because you basically had to get an artist and do all sorts of difficult things and things. But now it's so easy because, bluntly, you can create images much more cheaply, much more quickly. We're doing them all the time. We actually did a visual preference comparison on an American street. They're using a UK national opinion poll, got staggeringly different acceptance rates. From 66% versus I think 20%, depending on what the building looked like. So don't let anyone think this doesn't matter. This stuff does matter. To partly agree with Claire and partly contradict, please forgive me. So I would say, one final point is, I think for those of you working at the GLA, I'm not at a hyper-local level, be very, very careful of, how should I put this, of elite capture. So you've got to keep asking yourself, what will local people like? And I've seen, there are lots of design codes out there which are not linked to development orders and are frankly very unhelpful, because they're what essentially architects, and forgive any architects present, I know there's at least one, it's what architects like, not what the public like, and they're measurably different. There's a design disconnect. So you've got to, if this is public policy we're talking about, it's got to represent what local people like. But the good news is that's increasingly doable. What you then need to do is, I think, yes, encourage local councils to do it themselves, give them a period of time to do so. But I would argue, you at the GLA or at the national level, I think there does need to be a stick behind the carrot, which is, look, most 1890 areas, they're pretty similar. They're not identical, I agree. But if you don't do this locally, we'll do it for you. And we've got our simple, here's our, if you like, here's a nice way of putting it. Here's our 1890s pattern book, which will work in a lot of places. Feel free to take it, evolve it, use it. It's free, it's online, download it. Here you are, we've done 70% of the work for you. By all means, localise it. Please do. But if you don't localise it, we'll just impose it in a year's time, 18 months, 2 years' time. So I would use that combination of genuine encouragement of local leadership. And if at the national level, I'd also, you might want to have a sort of use it or lose it fund, where you actually pre-fund some of the support, some of the work required, because they do require work, as people will quite rightly give evidence. And you could also think in terms of allowing some of the flow that comes then from local development to flow back into council coffers. So I'd encourage it to be done locally. But think of London as a series of fried eggs, not as a series of slices of cheese. The development patterns are more similar by when it was done than in which quadrant of London it was done.
Thank you very much. Yep.
I would just like to, I agree with Nicholas. I think there is a wider conversation piece that needs to happen with the community out there around design codes. So I agree that they need to be local. I think the problem with character, I would agree with Claire as well, character areas are important. That piece of work normally is undertaken without liaising with people. I think we need to think very carefully who we talk to. If we look at the statistics around opposition to infill or to development generally, it's the 45 plus group. So we have to have a conversation with the widest representation of London, and particularly younger people as well. I think there's a difference that you need to slightly, yes, ask people what they like, but you also need to bring them on a bit of a journey around what development means in a modern context in terms of overheating, for example. When we, this is not rooftop extension, but years and years ago when we did a prototype of a zero carbon community in Bristol, we were looking at things that would have looked maybe like it might land out of space, but we had to have a conversation with local people about what it means to live in a zero-carbon community in the grounds of a listed building, and how we take them on board and have a really enthusiastic conversation with people around what are the elements of residential properties that are important around sociability and community life. So I don't think we should come to conclusions about what people might like, but I think we need to bring them on a wider journey of the wider challenges as well that comes with rooftop extensions.
Thank you. We have now reached the end of the first panel discussion. I would like to thank our first panel of guests for attending today's meeting and for their contributions. We'll now take a short adjournment for 5 minutes while we change panels.
Thank you.
Welcome back to the London Assembly's Planning and Regeneration Committee. We now continue our discussion on upward extensions in London, and I would like to welcome our second panel of guests. In the room we have Michael Ritchie, Place Shaping Manager, London Borough of Tower Hamlets, Michael Holland, Deputy Chief Executive Officer, Populo Living, Richard Truscott, Principal Design Officer, London Borough of Haringey, and Ash Barty, Chief Executive Officer, Apex Airspace Development. Welcome to you all. The first question to the second panel will be coming from myself, and it is, what do you see as the principal benefits and limitations of upwards extensions in London? Michael, if we could start with you.
Thank you very much. From a Tower Hamlets perspective, obviously our main focus on upwards extensions has been mansard roof extensions. And the real benefit that we've seen from that is allowing families, growing families, to extend their homes, which allows them to stay in the borough and continue to contribute to the community. So this is a sort of quite a strong message that was coming through from many of our residents, that this was a challenge that they were facing. That as their families grew, homes were no longer big enough for them, and for a range of different circumstances. And so that's kind of been the real benefit for us, particularly for the work that we've done with the roof extensions. Obviously, there's been challenges around that. Making sure that roof extensions preserve local character has been the main challenge that we've had, and it's taken sort of significant resource and effort on our part as council officers to sort of try to overcome that, and we think we've done it relatively successfully. So yeah, overall, we have seen benefit. It has been difficult to achieve, but worth it, I think.
Just follow up on that. How has that been achieved in terms of preserving that local character and ensuring that the design, for instance, is popular with local residents? Is something we were touching on quite a lot in the last panel.
So we've developed design codes for 5 of our conservation areas now. So this is talking specifically about mansard roof extensions here, just because that's been the main area of our work. So we developed design codes which have allowed us to control quite carefully what mansard roof extensions look like and what the visual impact of those will be, and to crucially, it creates consistency across those conservation areas, so that residents have the confidence knowing that they will be able to apply for permission, and they will know what they need to do in order to gain planning permission. And effectively, whilst they're not actually local development orders, so we've stopped short of doing that, they do create certainty through the design codes for residents, that they know that if they meet the conditions of the design code, they will get consent for their mansard roof extension. And that consistency and that control of the design allows us to sort of preserve and maintain character. There's 2 other important aspects of it, though, because we came to the view that even the best designed mansard roof was likely in the short to medium term to cause some harm to the conservation areas, in varying degrees of severity according to circumstance. So what we've done is we've kind of packaged that up with other measures that we're asking residents to do. And one is to improve the facade of their property, so the front-facing part of the building. And we've come up with a range of measures tailored to each conservation area, things that residents can do to improve their property. Typically, it's reinstating missing historical features, or just making other general improvements, so that you can kind of capture some kind of improvement as well alongside the mansard roof extension. And the second part is to contribute to a streetscape improvement fund. So that's a financial contribution which is linked to a unilateral undertaking, or sort of a planning obligation, essentially. And we capture that money and pool it together, and then use it to deliver streetscape improvements in the conservation area. So far we've used that money for tree planting, which might otherwise not have taken place. So you're getting mansard roof extensions, you're getting improved property facades, and also streetscape improvement as a kind of package to maintain the character of the areas.
Thank you very much. Michael.
Our approach, Populo is Newham Council's wholly owned housing company, so we sort of think holistically around housing development delivery for Newham, how we can look to tailor delivery solutions that help out Newham residents. Newham specifically has got one of the highest TA pressures in London. It's got very high social housing waiting lists, got a lot of overcrowding in the borough, and also it's ethnically diverse, so you have a lot of intergenerational living. So we have a range of or look to develop a range of different strategies to try and tackle those. We've got a big programme of new build development, but also we've looked at how we can creatively use existing assets that the council has. We think it's vitally important that, you know, we can be creative in how we can retrofit existing properties. You know, not just in terms of the energy performance, but also how we can add additional habitable rooms that help to address those real key policy points that impact our residents.
Thank you, Richard.
Yes, in the South Tottenham case, the one I've been asked to talk about particularly is it was primarily driven by local demand, to be honest, and it came out of it's a particular area of Haringey. And Haringey has a lot of ethnic diversity, and that leads to quite a lot of larger families and overcrowding. But in particular, in the South Tottenham area, there's a very large Haredi community, and that was leading to a significant demand for greater permissiveness of house extensions, and leading to a lot of rogue house extensions being built without planning permission or being got through the system, and then that led to an original guidance note before my time. I joined the council after the original SPD was first written, but that was not considered completely successful. There were still a lot of complaints that people were not able to build the extensions they want, and that other people in the area of South Tottenham were unhappy at the visual chaos that they felt was being created by house extensions that didn't match the existing houses. So back in 2013, or the year before 2013, obviously it takes about a year to get an SPD revised and readopted. I comprehensively revised the SPD to make it a lot more specific, a lot more detailed, a lot more unambiguous. But it originally rose out of local demand. Whether we spread it has long been a question that's been discussed but never decided.
Thank you. Ash?
Thank you. I guess our interaction with airspace development is slightly different. It came from us doing a development in Camden, but also not only just doing it in the context of Mansard extension. It was more of a block of flat, although it's a small block of flats, with a flat roof. And then we used volumetric modular to construct the new flat. So the actual installation on the day was like just a few hours. So that gave me the idea that if it can be replicated across London, there are like many more sites like this. So slightly different from Mansard in that sense. And then obviously we did the research that HTA, Dr. Riet was in charge of that. She was on the earlier panel. So then HTA looked at pretty much every building in Camden Council from the point of view of if extra story can be built. And then, extrapolated the data across London, and that came the number 180,000. So that gave us the idea that, having done it ourselves, that if volumetric modular construction can be combined with rooftops, then it can provide significant results. And obviously, it was quite a commercially good thing to do at that time.
Thank you. And Ash, what would you say about the environmental impacts of the type of development that you've just mentioned versus other forms of development, be they new build, be they basements?
So it obviously has significant advantages in the sense that in terms of carbon footprint, you're not demolishing the buildings. In terms of the biggest development we did later on in Anthony Roderick House, 95% of the steel that was used was recycled or recyclable. So there are significant advantages in this, I would say, just in the environmental sense, but also in the sense that it does kind of takes out the need for decanting. So it is also important in that context. But obviously, you can imagine that we're not demolishing and rebuilding. Rather, we are building on top. It has significant advantages.
Thank you. And Michael Holland, you mentioned being fully owned subsidiary of Newham Council. How do the council view the type of developments that you are doing? Is it seen as a way of trying to deal with the TA problem that you mentioned? Is it seen as a way of trying to make housing more affordable? Like, what is the benefit to Newham of what you do?
I think the answer is both, really. I think as a sector, we need to be pulling all levers to try to address the housing pressures that we have. That's greenfield as well as brownfield, as well as looking at the existing stock. So, across Newham, there are tens of thousands of terraced houses, Victorian terraced houses, some of which are in the RP or council housing stock. Newham Council itself has about 1,200 Victorian street properties. So there is a significant opportunity there to extend, retrofit those sort of properties, which will help overcrowding pressures, and also just generally helps to improve the quality of the homes that there are. They've also got a lot of post-war estates that typically have large flat roof areas that might lend themselves to sort of more of the apex airspace type approach, which we've got 2 consented schemes previously for. So yeah, I mean Newham as a borough supportive of this, we've been looking at doing it now for a number of years. We've completed 1 scheme, and we're in the process of progressing our first pilot Great Green Loft project in Stratford at the moment.
Thank you very much. Assemblymember Hamdash.
Great, thank you. Perhaps a follow-up question to local authorities. Now, with the upward extensions, there are lots of things that I find appealing. The idea of relieving overcrowding, the idea of helping people stay in their communities. But there are some parts that do make me think. The idea of more HMOs is less appealing. The idea of corporate investors looking to flip residential properties into properties that become more expensive. It'd be good to understand kind of when you thought about liberalising these rules, how much those potential downsides are a consideration and whether or not you've observed any of those in your communities that you're representing. Perhaps we start with Michael.
Yeah, sure, thank you. There were considerations, there were things that we actively thought about. So on the HMO point, we actually have Article 4 directions that prevent large HMOs anyway, so we were quite comfortable that we were managing that problem through other means anyway. And we also have a planning policy that prevents subdivision of properties that result in a loss of larger family units. So actually, in the type of houses that we were looking at, in most cases, I think pretty much in all cases, you wouldn't be able to subdivide those, and because what would happen is you'd be subdividing into a family home into 2 small non-family homes, and that would constitute the loss of a family dwelling. So we have planning policy that's already in place to prevent that. So the worst impacts that you talked about, I think we were confident that they were being managed through other policy measures. Whilst we were aware of it, we didn't think it necessarily is a problem, but it is something we continue to monitor. I think we have to be quite sort of clear with what's happened in Tower Hamlets is that whilst we are a borough that suffers really severe overcrowding, that's a very high priority for our administration generally, what's happening with mansard roof extensions is not really directly addressing that issue. The types of people that are benefiting from that are homeowners, from a different demographic perhaps, who are able, who are looking to kind of, they might be suffering from overcrowding in a different sense than statutory overcrowding. But that's not to say there's not a wider benefit of improving the housing stock more generally. But we do have to be, as you say, very, very sort of aware of not generating further problems by sort of solving one other problem. It's something we're very mindful of.
Richard, do you want to come in?
Yes, the housing extensions in South Tottenham SPD states that it's explicitly not intended to be used for flats that have been houses have been converted to flats or HMOs, and that there's a prohibition on houses that have been extended in the terms of the SPD being subsequently converted to flats or HMOs. So it is intended specifically for single-family dwellings, and it, by and large, does seem to be used for that. We have faced a few appeals, and we've not always won them. Sometimes inspectors take a view that the SPD is primarily about visual appearance, and it doesn't affect the visual appearance whether the interior of the house is a single family dwelling or an HMO, and that sometimes is a bit frustrating. Equally, maybe we need to accept that HMOs do form a part of the necessary dwelling mix, but that's genuinely not what we wanted it for, and we do genuinely see it as something that helps to relieve a particular sort of overcrowding, the overcrowding that is a pernicious and part of the problem of London housing, which is large families living in very overcrowded conditions with 3 or 4 children sharing a room and all sorts of things like that, which can have really bad effects on their education. And, the Haredi community does suffer from particularly difficult education circumstances, amongst other things. But also, we're aware that it's used by wide number, by people in South Tottenham who are not Haredis as well. Lots of other communities have made use of this of the policy, but overwhelmingly for single-family dwellings.
Michael, I know you're in a slightly different position, but I don't know whether you've got anything from a Newham perspective.
Yeah, I can't speak on behalf of planning colleagues in Newham, but there are tight controls, in the same way as there are in neighbouring boroughs about HMOs. Ours is very much about trying to build capacity for larger family homes, 4 and 5 bedroom homes, because they're very hard to deliver through a new build programme of housing delivery. It's hard enough cross-subsidising a 2-bedroom affordable home, let alone trying to cross-subsidise a 5-bedroom family home. So if you can take an existing 3-bedroom home, turn it into a 5-bedroom home, then it's a much more economic approach.
I'll go on to my next question. So I'm starting with Michael, actually. You've got experience of working on projects planned for adding new homes on top of existing council housing. What has been your experience of these projects?
I think we started our sort of journey in this space about 7 years ago. We were looking at a couple of approaches. We have our Great Green Loft, which is aimed at taking a sort of 3-bed, turning it into a 5-bed, sort of terraced house retrofit strategy. And then we also had our airspace programme. I know it's now upward extensions is now how we speak about those. So I think both of them have been challenging for different reasons. I would say, the upward extensions that we've completed. I mean, we've done one that was on where we converted a commercial building, former council office building, to a residential building. So it was a vacant block. It was easier, I think, to tackle the regulatory changes that there've been. Where we have planning permission for upward extensions on existing occupied council blocks, some of the regulatory changes that have happened over recent years, specifically fire regulations, have really pushed the challenges around delivering those. I think the observations that I would give, I think it's still a really valid approach, but trying to deliver in occupied buildings is a major constraint to it. So yeah, it's been a bit of a mixed bag. I think we're really looking forward to pushing forward our pilot Great Green Loft project, because I think we see an awful lot of opportunity for that in Newham, and also wider. Neighbouring boroughs already delivering similar approaches. So.
Being an Islington council, I know that Islington council has largely kind of ruled out these kind of measures because of viability. Are those considerations that you're looking at in Newham? I mean, it strikes me it's perhaps when we're building so little, it feels easier to build on empty land than upwards.
Yes, I mean, as I said, we've got in Newham, there's a programme of, wide, extensive programme of housing delivery on brownfield land, large estate regeneration programme, 8,000 homes in Newham's pipeline. This, I think, upward extensions should be part of the mix, and particularly upward extensions on, small-scale terraced houses. And I think that's where our immediate focus is at the moment, as Populo is delivering our pilot project on Wise Road. we have planning permission for the upward extensions on our other schemes. At the moment, it's not economically viable for us to deliver those. It's more economically viable for us to just go and deliver, a terrace of 8 houses on an infill garage site somewhere in the borough. So that's where the investment's going at the moment.
One tiny follow-up question, just so I can visualise it. So when we're looking and thinking about street properties, is it individual properties? Is it a whole road? Does the council own multiple? In Islington, I'm quite conscious that a lot of our council street properties are dotted around, and so actually you're not always able to extend multiple ones at once.
Yeah, it's a lot of them have been sold off. Yeah. So as common challenges across all London boroughs. So where we are piloting it, I mean, we're doing one house at the moment, but it's a street where the council does own other properties. So, I mean, we're looking to prove the concept. And if we can prove the concept, then I think that's when you can get into, more interesting discussions with the GLA and other local authorities about the benefits of the approach. So.
The challenges are right to buy, right? Ash, could I ask for your experience of kind of upwards expansion?
Yes, sure. So we have done 4 in total. So they were firstly one flat extension on one, like a penthouse in Camden. Then the second one, which was a penthouse in Camden, slightly more technical. The first one has 4 modules, the second one has 7. Then we did 4 flats in Tooting. And we couldn't do using volumetric modular because it wouldn't fit in. And then we have done the 30 unit, which is our flagship scheme, which we think that proved the concept, which is in Anthony Roderick House in partnership with Lambeth Southwark Housing Association. They're all 100% affordable, 30 homes. So it's been, I guess the journey is like this. You can take it from 2013 to 2016, kind of one era where everything is kind of working fine. Then the Brexit, then moving on to more complex projects coupled with utilization of volumetric modular on more complex projects. Moving on to, coronavirus, the other issues in the sector itself. So it's been, it's a little bit hard to kind of compare apples for apples because let's put it this way, that the overall delivery of housing became very difficult in terms of construction, in terms of managing coronavirus, and in terms of the state of volumetric modular in itself, how it was kind of improving technically, and not only to be delivered on rooftops, but on ground up as well. But overall, I would put it this way, that it came to my mind just a couple of days ago, that if we go and do a survey on Anthony Roderick House, so there were 30 families living there before, now there are 60 families living there. And their experience would be they were fearful or not sure before the project. They were not happy during the project, and they are very happy after the project because now there are 30 new homes. Some have, gone up or down, overcrowding, undercrowding. They love the place they're living in. It's much better looking. It's a similar process for us. Similarly, a couple other things have happened. I mean, post-Grenfell, obviously, the fire regulation have tightened, which is the right thing. But it has some unintended consequences as well. For example, the requirement for a second stair core above a certain height, and the need for putting sprinklers, which again is right safety measures, but the access to do that has become a challenge. So I would say it's the concept where we started, like airspace development can significantly help in terms of delivering numbers up, is still there. The land cost in London, which is very high, it mitigates still there. Probably volumetric modular needs more support at the moment because it's like a new technology. But there have been challenges, but there is nothing which is insurmountable, nothing which has fundamentally changes the equation. But the situation overall has changed.
Thank you. And I know, Ash, you've done some work about looking at hybrid quadrant and the potential for upwards expansion there, and potentially that there would be 280 additional homes that could be delivered. I will declare an interest here. I am the councillor for hybrid quadrant estate, so it's one of my specialist topics. But I'd love to hear kind of, how you've got to that number and how you could envision a council delivering those homes on site.
Sure. This particular site, I believe, there are 40 blocks consisting of around 600 homes currently. The way the numbers have been calculated by the architectural kind of design is there are 5 homes through 1-story extension above each block, and then there are 80 homes which is across 10 sites, which are garages and parking spaces at the moment. That could deliver 8 homes per kind of space, and then 5 units above each block. That's how we come to 280. It's like a very initial stage feasibility. It's not. It will be further refined, but we don't think we are far off in that sense either. The way we kind of perceive as we've been working on it is with Anthony Roderick House, where we did 30 homes, there was no decanting even for one day. But it probably would be more prudent to have the. And then also it was, what was the package for the residents over there, which is why I think now they would love it. A number of families, they were either undercrowding or overcrowding, so they got new homes. So either some families, they got their children new homes. Some families, they were simply like a couple was in a 2-bedroom flat, so they needed a 1-bed flat. Or if somebody wanted to move to lower floor, they were all accommodated in the process. So over here, but still the top floor did experience difficulties in that project. A couple of times the leak happened, which were dealt with, but nevertheless, we are building new homes above people's roofs. So the infill can provide the opportunity to deliver the homes first. So in case of need to accommodate any residents, so they won't have to go anywhere far off or anything. They will be still in the state they might like permanently or on temporary basis. And then 1-story extension can be done. We haven't done the technical surveys in terms of if it would need exoskeleton. Anthony Roderick House did need exoskeleton because the foundations were not strong enough. But we assume that it probably wouldn't need exoskeleton, in which case then 1-story extension can deliver 200 homes on rooftops.
I think one of my current hobbies is to look at garages and car parks and imagine homes there. So, you know, that's music to my ears. And I will actually, it's an idea I've heard before with hybrid quadrant. You know, I've had a colleague suggest that maybe in this process, you know, solar panels could be affixed to the roof, and there could be improvements made to the roofs. How is that part of how you'd imagine selling a development to, you know, I hear example of where residents quite often are initially opposed to these kind of developments. How can we sell the benefit of this kind of infill and upwards development to residents?
So I was just making notes about because I thought this might be a question, and it is a kind of biggest question. Some of the kind of fear is of unknown, and then it's kind of real as well, because somebody's going to be working on my home. What if it collapses? So the way we think to sell it is, if we are to take you know, the list of benefits that comes with it, because why would Anthony Roderick House people are now happier in the same building? And I made note there are 4 or 5 points. They got the lift, which was not there before. They got either dealt with overcrowding or undercrowding, so some people got new homes. So they were prioritized for that purpose. So when, like, it's kind of question what's in it for me. The overall, there's no decanting, so that was explained. How the building looks, now the building looks much better because it was given some upgradation works just to make it look better. There was lift, previously there was no lift. And then there were a couple of other things. Landscaping, so there's much better landscaping. And then probably in this case there would have to be sprinklers, so improved safety for them. And then there could be some, in Anthony Roderick House case, the roof works needed anyway. So they kind of it saved them a cost as well, otherwise it might have reflected in. So I guess our suggestion would be to speak to the residents and see if they like the benefits first. If they like the benefits, then the real conversation is that the benefits kind of comes with, this is the cost, that there are going to be more people living in this estate, and that would be more a balanced view. And also to take the time to kind of not educate, but make them aware in terms of the safety, that it will be a safe process, and the mitigations that will be put in place.
Great. just one last question, but because I am sadly very conscious of Coniston House that was being developed by East End Homes, where they have attempted an upwards expansion, which has sadly devastated the residents who live there. My predecessor Zoe Garbutt visited those homes. Damp, water, massive structural issues that are trying to be fixed. How can we make sure that we are delivering high quality upward expansions that residents then aren't regretting? And maybe I'll let Ash have a quick break. Michael, how can we build confidence in these kind of developments?
I mean, the confidence comes through delivery and demonstrating. I think we have the only project that we've delivered an airspace project, upward extension project in East Ham. Put 2 extra floors on top, was on top of an existing former council commercial building that was vacant. In effect, we stripped that building back to the absolute bones and then went again. And I think that, as I said earlier, trying to do an upward extension, I say eight apartments on top of an existing 2 or 3 story sort of 60s block. With the way regulations are now, is incredibly challenging with residents in situ. It's not something that, as popular, we would look to do. But if there was a way that you could, as part of an overall regeneration strategy, rehouse residents from a block into a new home, perhaps by building a initial new build block and then come in and do a deep retrofit, add extra floors on, then you get new build quality. You can get your warranty provisions, as we had to get. We got our Premier Guarantee warranty for the development in East Ham. It was very challenging to get that. I think that's how you can build the confidence of residents. In effect, they're getting a new build quality home that's deep retrofit. That's my personal view. Ash may have a different one.
Yes, sure. I think the parallel would be to see if there are new things that gets introduced, then how kind of they come about. Let's say when they introduced the electric cars, how they approach that. Having looked at a little bit in the future, what are the benefits, and then making sure that everything is then safe. I would say similarly, AI is probably similar. The challenge over here is if we are to do airspace developments on a project basis. So let's say there is a project and we got to make it financially viable on 10 units. There are so many uncertainties in there which are kind of unknown. And the only way you can do it is by doing it. So we've done 4 projects, we know a lot more. We can take it further. We can, I think, probably 20-30% of the time, if we take a lot of people from 10 different estates to this, they will be more convinced now, having seen that happen. But if they will be a lot more convinced if they have seen it happen 10 times. So it's kind of appreciating at a statutory level, at a political level, that how much it can contribute, what are the barriers, and how do we deal with those barriers. And if the kind of cost is we're going to do 5 or 10 projects and we're going to take into certain mitigations, so be it. Would the leaks happen? Leaks would definitely happen, or likely to happen. But can it be that we have done it a few times, making sure the leaks don't happen? That yes. As I said, like the second project was better than the first one. The fourth one was better than the first 3. But there is still more to be done. I would say probably it's the holistic approach that would kind of deal with this kind of situation. But at the same time, if you just look at the quadrant numbers, 280 homes, I doubt it 280 affordable homes can be delivered in Islington. There are not going to be many plots that you can do it.
Assemblymember Baker.
Thanks, Chair. And apologies to arriving a little bit late back. I had a hay fever contact lens emergency. So I'm going to ask some questions to Tower Hamlets Michael and Richard from Haringey. And if you have said anything that I ask you, please do not feel free to repeat yourself just because I haven't heard it before. It's all recorded, so just apologies if I ask something that you have covered. So, Michael and Richard, can you explain what prompted your each borough's work on producing planning guidance for upwards extensions and mansard roofs?
Yeah, I can go first. I did cover this briefly earlier, but it's fine. I can actually expand on it. So, I mean, as I said, our main motivation was a desire from residents to make this happen, and that was because many told us they were experiencing challenges extending their homes to accommodate their growing families or to cater for other circumstances. So the main reason was given is that families were expanding, and the children needed bedrooms. And without the ability to extend their homes, they would be forced to move out of the borough. And there's a shortage of family-sized homes in Tower Hamlets generally, so there weren't really many options or many places for them to go. And so that was something that, and the kind of social cohesion argument was put to us quite a lot as to, well, actually, if we're able to stay here, this is going to benefit the schools, going to benefit the local community, and we absolutely saw the value in that. It's not just about families with children, though. It's obviously, the point about intergenerational living was made that sometimes parents have to move in with their children. That's the thing that needs to happen. We heard that from a lot of residents as well, and also particularly post-COVID. Interestingly, now we're being told that people are working at home a lot more often, and now they're finding that with all those other things going on, there's an even greater need for space now because their homes are just not big enough for what they need. And as again, the point I made earlier is not necessarily for us. It wasn't about statutory overcrowding as such, more just kind of families wanting to have a bigger home because that's what they felt they needed. Our administration is focused on tackling statutory overcrowding in different ways. It's a whole different focus for the council. So that was kind of our main driver, and we were quite closely engaged with residents on exploring those issues. So this dates back. We actually started working on this in 2014. We had a sort of challenge overview, the scrutiny challenge session where officers were sort of called by members to present evidence and discuss these issues with residents there, who were able to kind of put their concerns directly to us, and we were going away to kind of look at what was and wasn't possible. And then through an iterative process over a number of years, working with residents and holding consultations, we eventually landed on this mansard roof guidance, which we have most recently updated and expanded to cover 5 areas. It started off on 2. Inevitably now, I hear on a weekly basis from residents of other parts of the borough, quite rightly, who would like it to be extended to their areas, and that's obviously what would happen. So we have worked quite closely with the residents to basically to really hear what it was they wanted. I should say that alongside all those residents that were kind of driving us to do this, there were residents that have concerns, who particularly about the historic environment, but also about the issues of HMOs and subdivision, which was mentioned earlier. And so we also had to be kind of, whilst listening to what the drivers were and what was making this a thing that we should be doing, we also needed to have pay enough regard for listening to the issues that maybe we're trying to stop this from happening and kind of balance the two essentially.
Thank you, Richard.
I mean, largely, as Michael said, I did say some of these things earlier as well, but the differences in Haringey's case, it did come from the local community, but particularly because of the large Reddy community in the South Tottenham area. And the other big difference, I suppose, is that our guidance in South Tottenham is not about mansards. It's not a mansard area. It's about additional floors to pitched roofed 2-storey terraced houses. So that's the really big difference. It's saying that you could, obviously there is the permission to build to the back of a pitched roof. So we say you can build to the max of that, not limited to the permitted development rights. But we also say that you could add an additional floor, either as a parapet with a flat roof behind that, or an additional floor with with a pitched roof above that, which can be a large enough pitched roof to contain rooms within the roof, so effectively 1.5, or you could almost say 2 stories. So it turns the street turns the terrace property within that street, and gradually the entire street might well transform into consistently that height, from a 2-storey street into a 3-storey street.
Thanks. That's really helpful. And so, how have you have you been able to follow up what the effect is on the individuals or the families who were there? So have you seen more families stay in the houses that they're originally in? So as you said, that they haven't had to move out because families are growing. Have you been able to check whether you have seen a rise in HMOs? You know, is this something that you've actively tracked in terms of the impact on housing and changing housing as a result of those extensions that were done on that basis?
Unfortunately, we haven't got really the resources to do that sort of, detailed numerical analysis of how. Do
you have a sense of it? I mean, it may be different. It might be different. Yeah. What's your sense then?
The sense is that it has been popular.
Yes.
You can certainly see a lot of extensions. The vast majority of them done really well. We've certainly had reports back of people really happy. Local members covering the area have been very happy. We've got a number of local architects who have become specialists in South Tottenham house extensions and have said how much they appreciate the guidance.
I bet they do. That's not negative, by the way,
no,
but I bet they do. Yeah.
Absolutely not. No, and have come back to us with further suggestions about how we could permit even more extensions, some of which we've pushed back on, and some of which we said, well, maybe we could one day, maybe we could even because we have always said, this is a guidance that gives, well, actually 3 different models for how you would normally be granted permission for this sort of extension. Mm-hmm. This shows you exactly how to do it. But we've always said, if you've got another idea that you want to come forward with, obviously, like anywhere else in the borough or anywhere else in the world, in Britain, you can come with your own wild and wacky proposal, and we'll consider it. If you pay for a pre-app, we'll be delighted to consider it. And yes, some people have done that, and we have sometimes granted permissions for variations that go beyond the guidance.
But your sense is that, because obviously we're looking at this partly in terms of what it can contribute in terms of the housing crisis. Now, obviously, that's a bit contested because you're making larger homes rather than necessarily creating new ones in these circumstances. But certainly, if it means families aren't moving around when they don't need to, that's a positive thing. I think. But is your sense that certainly in Haringey in those areas that it's the primary thing that's done is enabled families to stay in the homes they are in rather than,
absolutely, yes.
Break them up
and it's helped hugely with overcrowding problems that large families have experienced.
Yes, which is a positive thing, even if it doesn't then.
There have been a few cases where houses have been extended and then subsequently converted to HMOs.
Yeah.
It's not supposed to happen in accordance with the SPD.
Yeah.
We've taken enforcement action and had appeals, and some of them we've won and some of them we've lost. But that's the way it goes. But I don't think it's led to a huge increase in HMOs.
Yeah.
We haven't got the numbers to tell you, but that's not the impression we get by any means.
That's helpful. Thank you, Michael.
I think our experience has been very similar. Unfortunately, we don't have the resources to do a comprehensive study, though that would be, would be very interesting and very revealing, I think. But we are in the position where we have been fortunate enough that we now have guidance for 5 areas, and when we did 2 originally, and we went out and extended it to 3. But when we extended it to 3, we went back and we redid the first 2 again, so that all 5 would be consistent, because we did a review, looked at how the guidance was working in kind of technical design conservation terms mainly, and how it works. And that revealed a number of issues that we thought we could improve. So we actually re-adopted new guidance for the first 2. So that was consulted on when we did the other 3. So that gave us an opportunity to go back to the residents of the first 2 conservation areas. And whilst we weren't asking specifically, we didn't really get much back from residents. They would have had an opportunity to comment whether they were in favour of this or not. We didn't really get a huge amount back saying, "Oh, this has caused problems." Yeah. So it's not that it wouldn't be fair to say. So therefore, we conclude there were no problems. That would be wrong. But certainly, I didn't get the message back when speaking to residents and receiving emails. And I personally read every email that we received on that, and I didn't see that coming up. Yeah. But that's not a comprehensive kind of public consultation exercise on that point, but it's not. I'm not hearing back when we often do. We do. Our residents are usually very engaged with that sort of thing. So I think it is anecdotally working in that respect.
That's helpful, thank you. And do either of you have any information on how you've ensured that conservation areas have been treated sensitively and how you've done that in guidelines and planning documents?
South Tottenham is not a conservation area.
I mean, I didn't know and I didn't want to say. I know South Tottenham.
So originally there was a conservation area along Tottenham High Road, which formed the western boundary of the SPD area. Actually, most of that conservation area has since been deleted following a conservation area review, but we haven't expanded the area yet. We may expand it. It's our new local plan that's currently going through the process, was consulted on over the new year, and the policy team are busy incorporating the consultation comments, allows the potential for possible expansions of the area, maybe not just expanding the border of the existing area, but taking other areas, but doesn't commit to any specific areas, doesn't commit to us expanding it, but we don't particularly plan to. I don't think we would consider applying it to conservation areas at all. I don't think it would be.
Would that just be too complicated?
The South Tottenham method, which is adding another floor, is probably too big a transformation for it to ever be conservation area compliant, unless you were doing it to detractors within a conservation area.
Okay, thanks.
Our experience is actually very much different because we are looking particularly at conservation areas, but we're also looking at very different mansards or a different type of extension where they're designed to integrate into the existing streetscape much more carefully. I did talk earlier about that. We have a design code which ensures consistency and a high quality of design across all properties, so that residents know what they need to do to make it look the same as their neighbour. And we also ask that they, where possible, carry out improvements to the front of their building, so that's to offset some of the harm that we think is caused by mansards. So we think there is some residual harm, particularly in the short to medium term, where you've got lots of different gaps in the streetscape, essentially. So one of the things we've asked them to do is offset that harm by reinstating a missing cornice or repairing missing features or whatever. That has a general uplift on the conservation area, and also contributing towards a financial contribution towards the Streetscape Improvement Fund, which we use to deliver projects. What we've used it so far is planting street trees, which has been quite successful. Just to add on a couple of points to what I didn't say earlier, is on the conservation point, our work has been very much conservation led. So that's been our kind of main concern, and we have put a lot of time and effort into making that work from our perspective, including 3D modelling to understand how the degree of visibility of the roof extensions from different angles, and that's been quite important for us to kind of give us the confidence that we weren't doing something that was inappropriate and going to have long-term harm, and also designing some of the elements of the building in quite a lot of detail. So the updated guidance we've adopted recently, we've gone into quite a lot of detail about the thickness of the dormer cheeks, so the bits of the side of the windows on the roof, how thick those should be, because we realise you need to actually fit quite a lot of insulation in there now for modern building regs, and that proved quite difficult to design, and so we had to have a few iterations, and we had a specialist conservation architect work with us. And so that's not the sort of thing, it's actually going into quite a lot of detail you would normally put into a design code. And we're actually doing some front-loading some of the design work for the residents, but just because we wanted to know that it was possible and what it would look like when it's done. So we've now done that work, and residents can kind of benefit from that. And we're finding that it's all pretty much consistent now, and so we've got that. And the other issue, in one of the conservation areas, we had a listed building in the middle of a terrace, and so we were talking about adding roof extensions to the whole terrace. But then what would you do with this listed building in the middle? Because we've excluded listed buildings from our guidance. Does that then make it look odd because the buildings are kind of rising up taller than the listed building in the middle? So we had to 3D model that. And then we had to look at, well, actually, would you then consider adding a roof extension onto the listed building to kind of balance it out? And then we worked out for various technical reasons that wouldn't be possible because of where staircases are and things like that. And so, again, a lot of thought went into that one street within 5 conservation areas just to think, well, what would this localised impact be? So it's really what I'm getting at here is a sort of word of warning. Design codes are great, and they create certainty and allow residents to achieve certain things and allow boroughs to achieve certain things, but they do require work. And once you start going down that road, sometimes there's this layer after layer of difficulty that you didn't realise you were going to face to begin with. So That's been our experience.
Thanks. That's really interesting. And just going back to you mentioned sort of the designs that came forward, and I think you both hinted towards it in terms of consistency of the architects and stuff like that. But presumably, do you get any designs that are still coming forward that aren't acceptable or that aren't but how you're dealing with that, and how much is that still happening? Is it going down? So.
I guess less so from our point of view because mansards are there really is one way of doing. Well, I mean, there's lots of ways of doing it, but we've kind of set out the right way of doing it. But there's not.
So there's little flexibility.
There's little flexibility, and what we've done is reduce that flexibility even further. We originally allowed more flexibility at the rear of the property in theory where it wasn't as visible. So we actually the guidance said you could be more creative and have larger window. But when we did that, we realised that some quite bad things were happening, and that they were quite visible particularly from some of the conservation areas have canal towpaths and things. So we took that out of the guidance and said, actually, no, we want you just to keep it as as calm as possible at the back. So yeah. There were issues there were people trying to push the boundary, and every now and again you do get somebody who comes along and just wants to do something crazy, and the thing is we feel like we've kind of gone quite a long way in allowing this to happen. So the important thing is for us to keep it as consistent as possible is the reasonable thing to do, I think.
You can't design out every opportunity, every chance that people are going to take to make their own preferences. Is there anything you've got to add to that, Richard?
I mean, we do still get the occasional applicant who wants to do something or particularly an applicant whose architect for some reason, well, probably isn't an architect, or probably is a dormer window company or something like that, who think that they can do this very simply and don't provide all the drawings necessary or don't detail it properly. So there are occasions, it's very difficult to get applicants to properly show the context, for instance. They'll just show their house. And if you're adding another floor, you're creating a new gable wall on top of the roof of the two houses either side of it. That's a new elevation that they need to provide that occasionally someone will not provide because they don't realise that is also required. But if they read the guidance properly, then they shouldn't do that.
Thanks.
That should be clear.
And finally, in terms of the London Plan and London Plan guidance, is there anything else that you think should come forward that could, particularly on small sites, that could help boroughs further in this area?
That's a tricky one because I guess it depends what people want to achieve. I think
to achieve what you want to achieve.
Yeah.
So what do you want?
So I think the journey that we've been on with roof extensions, we've gone from a position of being, particularly from a conservation point of view, being very hesitant and reluctant to do it, and gradually becoming more and more permissive. And now we've got to a point where we have a small part of the borough, 5 of 58 conservation areas, you can have them. And I think there's now a sort of will to kind of do it, but we don't have the time or resources to kind of expand that work. And I think a lot of people kind of are now in a position where they might be waiting for some larger authority kind of to put more direction or more impetus on councils to kind of do that for themselves. Because as far as we're aware, it's really very much optional for councils to do this or not. As I say, Tower Hamlets is focused on delivering housing and tackling overcrowding, which are very serious issues, through other means. And that's a really big drive for us. And so that's where all our resources are going to our accelerated housing programme and things like that. Whereas so roof extensions, particularly mansards, is a bit of a sideshow compared to that. So if there was a will to kind of make it happen, I think some boroughs might need more of a push to kind of say, well, actually, I think the MPPF tried to do that, but I haven't really seen that having a massive impact. So I'm not quite sure whether it needs to be more at a more local level, at London Plan level, for that to happen.
Thanks.
I don't think there's anything particularly that it would be helpful for the London Plan to add in terms of house extensions.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it ought to be something that stays at the local council level.
Yeah.
And I think we would really like to do more work on it, but resources are so tight, and at the moment we're wholly focused on our new local plan.
Yeah.
Maybe after that has been, we've got it all through and adopted, we would like to look at some additional work, including additional design code type of work. We have said that we will in the local plan, and it might include additional areas or additional types of additional floor extensions. I think it would be worth considering. Maybe we have got some areas. We're not a borough that's got the sort of properties which are hugely appropriate for mansards generally. We're a bit more out of London, so we're a bit more sort of pitched roofs with eaves rather than flat roofs or shallow pitched roofs behind a parapet. We do have a few of those areas, but maybe we would consider a mansard type of design guide for those sort of areas, because we do recognise it's been successful, but it's not the main thing, as Michael said as well.
Thanks. As often with planning, you scratch the surface, and actually what you need is a bit more resources and more specialist knowledge at all levels. So thanks. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you. Just following up on that, Michael, just so I'm clear, in terms of the different conservation areas, do they all have their own code, or is it slightly nuanced for each of the 5 conservation areas, or is it consistent across the 5?
It's essentially the same. So the mansard roof, the prototype design is essentially the same for all 5. So within each of the 5, we've gone through. We've said this is what it should look like, and these are various parameters. It should be set back this much. The dormer should be designed this way. The tiles should be made of natural Welsh slate, and the downpipe should go to the rear, and things like that. But what we've done is also gone property to property and said exactly which ones can have a mansard and which ones can't, because some of them, there are specific reasons they have a roof type that's not compatible. So that was a big part of the work, is to go through property by property and just try to work out which ones this is going to apply to. And it's kind of obvious to begin with, because it's the Victorian terraced houses, but every now and again there's one that's been altered and we're not quite sure, and so it might apply to it. We found that some of them are really shallow, and there's no way you're ever going to get a roof extension on there, because you just wouldn't get a stair up there and then relieve yourself with any usable floor space. And so we've then said specifically it doesn't apply to these ones, because it's not feasible. So that's where they differ, in that there's a specific. We've looked at properties individually, and then also when we looked at the facade improvements, we've had to look at each conservation area differently. Actually, the 5 that we've done are all very similar. So actually, we've said that the facade improvements we're asking them to do are all pretty much the same. There's a bit of variation between the two, so it wasn't a huge amount of work. I think if you moved on to a different group of conservation areas, you might need to do a bit more work in that respect. But I don't know, maybe perhaps you're getting at, is it possible to then extrapolate that one guide across all conservation areas?
Well, yeah, my question was then going to be, if it is the same across the 5, could that not just be expanded across all of them? But I guess the reason being is that you're doing a really hyper-granular look at each property and whether that's feasible.
Yeah, I think that's you got it right there. I think it's what we've learned is it is possible. There are enough similarities to mean that we could, but we couldn't just on day one or today or just say right now it applies to all of them. We need to go and look and decide whether it applied to all of them or not. And so there's this either it apply. What I'm trying to say is there's always going to be some work to do. I think it probably is pretty compatible with many of our conservation areas. So I think you would probably find that actually it does work on the whole, I think.
If you're slightly less demanding around, say, heritage improvements, etc., do you think that would make it easier to then be like, go ahead on the other conservation areas?
I think so. Yes, I think the point that was made on the earlier panel was about, well, let's try and get ourselves to a point where like we're not going to design everything perfectly. This is our best guess, guess is probably not the best word, but our best effort at doing this. And if you follow this, we'll be like 80% of the way there. There is a logic to that. Yes, I mean because our approach has been very softly towards this, because it was such a big change from being so resistant to it in the past. We've started off being very cautious. I think there probably is scope to kind of relax that cautiousness, maybe.
That's really helpful, thank you. And both of your boroughs are cited as successful examples of using design guidance to do upward extensions. I was wondering if you had any thoughts on why other boroughs maybe haven't followed in your footsteps. I mean, particularly in the case of, say, Haringey, where you've got an even bigger Haredi community in neighbouring Hackney, why they haven't followed your lead?
Well, they have. They took a fairly long process, but they have got a new AAP, Area Action Plan for Stamford Hill, which I think they're waiting for the inspector's report for, I think, which will be adopted fairly soon. And it absolutely copies our SPD, and they copied some of my drawings, I'm pleased to see. But but it also adds a lot more nuance and a lot more extra detail, because they have a lot of other sorts of properties which our fairly small South Tottenham area doesn't have, partly because you're moving a bit closer into inner London when you're getting into Stamford Hill, and certainly down towards Stoke Newington, you know, some of those Victorian villas and things like that we don't have so much in Haringey. And so they've provided approaches and processes for additional extensions on those sort of properties as well. So, and they've had to go into a lot more detail about which streets might be and might not be suitable because of the variations. But I think they are following it, and yeah, maybe some others will. That'd be good to see. But it's specific to a particular sort of late 19th century through to the 1930s, quite small two-storey terraced houses, which is what that area of South Tottenham has. And if we are to extend it to other parts of Haringey in exactly the same way, there'll be much smaller areas, you know, just a street here and 2 or 3 streets there, rather than an area as large as South Tottenham. And South Tottenham is not large, you know, it's only about a quarter or a third of a ward.
Thank you. Assemblyman Hamdash.
Great, thank you. Just a question for Richard. So I note that kind of the South Tottenham SPD has a line about residents are encouraged to incorporate measures to reduce energy consumption and generate carbon-free energy in their homes. I'd love to know kind of how often do you see those measures coming through in the proposals that are coming forward?
I mean, I don't really, because I'm the design officer. I don't really get involved in everyday residential applications that often, and if I do, I'm not really looking at the energy measures that the applicants are proposing. I mean, I suppose the thing I would say also is, though, that there will inevitably be better carbon performance because they're having to build a new roof, and there will be some new walls, quite probably. So they're going to have to be compliant with the latest building regs, which is a hell of a lot better than 1890 or 1930. You know, we have other policies which require or encourage better carbon and energy performance, and they are applicable to these as to any other application. But it's not specifically about that, no.
Michael, I just wonder as well, in your experience, are you seeing kind of improvements in EPC ratings and you know, things that, you know, from a climate perspective we potentially could be excited about?
Yes, we haven't. What we haven't done is a kind of thorough, detailed study of this. But one of the things we looked at when we updated our guidance was when the Mansard roof extensions had already happened. We went back and looked at where the data was available, what the difference in EPC ratings was, because obviously all that information is publicly available, and so we could look at the date that the Mansard was constructed and compare. And it wasn't a huge sample to go from, but generally, as you would expect, and as I said, when you add a Mansard roof extension or any roof extension, you're adding a new story that's built to modern building regs. That has quite a big beneficial improvement on the performance of the property. And so generally, the APC ratings are going up 2 or 3 bands, I would say. It's sometimes difficult because you have to pick out what effect the Mansard is having or the roof extension is having, and then what else is being done at the same time. So some people will be like, well, I'm going to install a heat pump, or I'm going to double glaze my windows. So sometimes it's a package of things that's having that big uplift. But I think the roof extension itself is one of the biggest, the way I understand it, is one of the biggest contributors to that uplift. So it is a really positive thing, I think, for people to do. And the other point is that, yes, it's difficult to separate it out from other things that are happening, but those other things may not have happened if they hadn't been allowed to build a roof extension, because people are thinking, well, this house is not really big enough for me. I'm not going to invest in new windows. I'm not going to install a heat pump or solar panels, because I probably will have to move next year to somewhere where I have more space. And so they will wait for that forever home before they do those things. And now we're seeing that happening more often in properties in Tower Hamlets, and people are installing solar panels and all these sorts of things on these small homes because they've been able to expand them. So I think the two things work together quite well. It has an environmental benefit in and of itself, but also it has a lot of people invest in their properties for the longer term.
Just a follow-up question, because your examples are in conservation areas. Now, again, being an Islington councillor, a lot of Islington is in a conservation area, and a lot of residents talk to me about, sadly, how challenging it can be to install solar panels and double glazing. And I know the council have introduced a new SPD, but some residents are still finding it challenging. How easy is it, if you're putting a mansard roof in Tower Hamlets on this, to stick a solar panel on? What kind of considerations do they need to make? Do you get any feedback about whether there are still challenges about making those improvements?
Yes, that was quite sort of one of the bigger issues that we were discussing with the residents, and feedback we had when we did the most recent consultation, because we, as through a sort of abundance of caution, have said that you shouldn't have solar panels that are visible on a front-facing slope. So it depends. So basically, how easy it is depends on which way your building faces. So obviously, you don't want to have them on a north-facing slope. So generally we allow them on the rear, where they're not seen in the sort of sensitive part of the street scene. Now, if your house faces the wrong way for that to be a benefit to you, then we've said the guidance says you shouldn't install them. However, we would look at it on a case-by-case basis, and if you could prove that it wasn't visible through whatever means, I think we would probably consider that. We don't want to say a blanket no to solar panels, because obviously we see the value absolutely in them, and so that's the sort of thing we might look at it on a case-by-case basis. But whether they can be hidden or they're not visible from the front, we have no problem with that. And the guidance actually sort of gives advice about how best to install them to make them in line with the roof rather than sticking up too far. And double glazing we are more relaxed about. So we would expect the new windows in the roof extension to obviously be double glazed, and we provide guidance about how better to achieve less visually intrusive double glazing throughout the rest of the property. So it's not a blanket no for that. So yeah, we're a bit more relaxed than we used to be about these things.
Do you think the GLA could be helpful in providing kind of design codes and guidance on how councils could help achieve the shared goal of both getting a solar panel on and a mansard roof?
I mean, I guess so. I think any kind of guidance is helpful. It's a tricky one to answer, because I don't know to what degree it would need to be sort of worked out on a local level, just not because of local politics, but I'm thinking more because of local kind of considerations. But I suppose going back to what was said earlier about typology and character types, it's a certain there is a wider piece of work that could be done to say, well, this type of property, these are the types of sustainability measure that would be most appropriate, and then that kind of narrows your search down. Then you know where you're looking to achieve certain things.
Assemblyman Boff.
Actually, I think there's a book to be written about the Orthodox Jewish community in North London. Crosses the border, as the chairman has alluded to, because South Tottenham, Haringey Council seemed to sort out the situation quite a few years back. And the book should be written about why it took Hackney so long, where there was this sort of rancorous relationship between the Orthodox Jewish community in Stamford Hill and the local council, which all seems to circulate pretty much around this issue of the ability for families to expand their own homes as their families expanded. So you should be commended for the example you set in South Tottenham. It's just such a shame that Hackney took so long catching up. Mr. Barty, what planning policy change would make it simpler for you to come forward with more upward extension schemes or airspace schemes?
I think with regards to the planning policy, we had a lot of support from the government. We haven't used permitted development rights on any of our developments, but it's there, and I guess many of the developers have taken advantage of that. We're not particularly, I mean, I can give you let's say the experience of Anthony Roderick House, where all 30 homes were affordable. And the planning process was more impacted by the lack of resources than support. It's not enough planning officers, and it's not high enough on the agenda, and it's competing with other schemes. So there isn't any particular planning policy, I would say, that would help airspace development. I would say it's the policy in itself towards airspace development, some kind of study what it can add to the London's housing. I mean, I would just give this example. I was listening to Andy Burnham's speech, and the key thing was more council housing, dense buildings, save green belt wherever you can. And kind of answer is that if you want to do it in London, well, how else you can do other than kind of doing airspace development, which is you have loads of council housing, have a bit more on top of the council housing, and in the process also make the lives or living conditions better for the people who are living in council housing. It's more of government's policy or view of towards airspace development, taking it as a new form of, addition to building homes in an area like London, than any particular change in planning policy, I would say.
Right, and so you're saying what you said earlier was effectively it's the speed of turnover of decisions from local authorities, which I think all planning departments in London would sympathise with you there about about that ability to turn over decisions quickly. Is that perhaps our other guests? Is there any particular single change that you would like to see in planning policy? National.
Less so in policy. I think there is broad policy support, I'd say, from we've seen. I mean, we had no problem getting the 2 planning permissions for our upward extension projects, and it was more challenging to get our Great Green Loft through the planning system. And I think that what we as Popular in Newham need to do is develop that, do the pilot project so that we can prove the concept, and then we've got something that we can show. We can show the GLA and other anybody who's interested in using that as a way of building capacity across existing housing stock. I mean, colleagues in neighbouring boroughs are proving that actually the planning system is able to, through supplementary guidance, to approach this and tackle it and deliver it through the planning system. I think where the GLA could really support is recognising or is helping to look at the local. London has such different character areas across. There's no one-size-fits-all approach to this. So how the GLA can help boroughs to get confident around some of these, the upward extension approach at a local level, at a street level, whether that's using modern, digital mapping, AI, how you can try to sort of look at the different areas of London and the different approaches that there are, and therefore identify suitable streets and bring some comfort to local planning authorities that actually this is how you should be trying to tackle this. I think that would be a great help from where we sit.
Okay. No single measures coming forward. I'll hand back to you, Chair.
Thank you very much. We've now reached the end of the session. I would like to thank all our guests for attending the meeting and for all of your contributions today. The committee has a few more short items of business to address. Can I ask the committee to note the report and the discussion? You can also delegate authority to me as chair in consultation with party group lead members to agree any output arising from the discussion. Can I ask the committee to note its work programme and the additional activity undertaken since its last meeting, namely the site visit to the London Legacy Development Corporation on the 29th of June, which was fantastic. The next meeting of the committee is scheduled for the 4th of September 2026 at 10 a.m. in the Chamber, City Hall. I have no urgent business, which concludes today's meeting.